Welcome to Sleepy Stories. In this episode, we will take a clear and steady look at how the human senses open the world to us. The goal is to help you learn while you rest. If you do not fall asleep right away, that is completely fine. In the time you are awake, you will discover how the body translates light, vibration, and chemistry into awareness. Simply listen, let your breathing slow, and allow the information to settle at its own pace. The human body is a network of observation. Every instant, invisible messengers cross the boundary between self and environment. Photons glide through the cornea, sound waves ripple through air and bone, molecules drift on currents of breath, and fine changes in pressure stir the skin. Each event begins as pure physics and chemistry, energy, motion, and matter, yet ends as something deeply personal: sight, sound, taste, smell, and touch. Our senses are translators between worlds, converting the measurable into the meaningful. Sight gathers patterns of light, allowing recognition and navigation. Hearing interprets minute fluctuations in air pressure so that vibration becomes voice and music. Smell and taste interpret chemical shapes, warning of spoilage or revealing sweetness and spice. Touch interprets texture, temperature, and motion, mapping the body's contact with its surroundings. These five classical senses are only the surface of perception. Beneath them work hidden senses that track balance, movement, pain, temperature, and even the position of our own limbs in space. Together they form a continuous dialogue between body and world. Long before eyes or ears existed, life survived by noticing. The first living cells could detect gradients of light or nutrient, moving toward what helped and away from what harmed. Over immense stretches of time, these primitive detectors became specialized organs. Pigments that once shielded a cell from sunlight became photoreceptors. Mechanical stress sensors evolved into hearing organs. Chemical receptors spread into fields of smell and taste. The story of the senses is the story of evolution refining attention itself. Each sense gathers information in a distinct language, but all translated into the same electrical code. When light strikes a photoreceptor or pressure bends a nerve ending, charged particles move across a cell membrane, creating tiny pulses of voltage. These impulses travel along neurons, forming patterns that the brain interprets as the texture of fabric, the flavor of fruit, or the color of dawn. In this way, the universe outside becomes electrical conversation within. Every sensation you experience is a current of ions whispering through tissue. Perception is never passive. The brain filters, compares, and predicts constantly. It merges signals from different senses and fills gaps with expectation. What you see and hear is a constructed model, an internal simulation precise enough for survival, yet flexible enough for imagination. Even now, as you listen, your auditory system adjusts to volume and tone, while your visual cortex interprets the dim light behind your closed eyelids. The world continues, but your mind edits it into calm simplicity. The senses also shape emotion and memory. The brightness of sunlight can lift mood. A minor key can draw quiet reflection. Smell and taste thread directly into the brain's emotional centers, binding experience to feeling. A faint perfume or the scent of rain can open entire chapters of remembered life. Through these associations, perception becomes the fabric of identity. You are, in part, the sum of what you have sensed. Without perception, thought would have no anchor. It is through contact with the world that meaning arises. Every idea begins as sensation refined by memory and language. The physical and the mental are not separate realms but stages of one process, the transformation of energy into awareness. To understand the senses is to glimpse how consciousness is rooted in matter. Now, as the rhythm of your breathing steadies, notice the subtler sensations around you: the weight of gravity, the softness of air, the gentle pulse within your chest. Even in stillness, countless receptors report, adjust, and protect. Perception never truly stops. It only quiets its voice when rest approaches. Tonight, We will follow that quiet voice from its ancient origins to its most delicate forms, tracing how every living creature listens to the universe through its body. The story begins far back in time, when the first spark of sensation stirred in simple life. From that single act of noticing, the difference between light and dark, grew the vast sensory symphony that now shapes every human moment. Life's ability to sense began long before there were eyes to see or ears to hear. In the ancient oceans, billions of years ago, the first single-celled organisms floated through water dense with light, heat, and chemical gradients. They had no awareness in any human sense, yet they could detect differences that meant survival. Some moved toward warmth or nutrients, others retreated from toxins or shadow. These primitive responses were the first whispers of perception, the biological capacity to distinguish one state of the world from another. Chemistry served as the first messenger. Within the thin membranes of early cells lay molecules able to change shape when exposed to light or when they touched particular substances. A pigment might bend slightly under illumination, starting a chain reaction that altered movement. A surface receptor might attach to a nutrient molecule, triggering a chemical signal inside. Each adjustment linked the outside world to internal behavior. In this way, sensing was born not from sight or thought, but from the practical need to survive. Over time, evolution refined these reactions. Cells with more sensitive pigments captured energy efficiently. Those with accurate motion detectors escaped predators. Natural selection favored responsiveness. Gradually, clusters of receptors specialized for certain tasks, detecting vibration, temperature, or chemistry, formed the foundations of later sense organs. What we now experience as color, sound, or scent was once just difference, more or less light, more or less sugar, warmth, or cold. Early multicellular organisms expanded this vocabulary. Nerve cells emerged, capable of carrying electrical impulses from one region to another. This innovation allowed distant parts of a body to coordinate. A touch on one end could prompt movement on the other. With connectivity came complexity. Networks of neurons began to link sensory surfaces with muscles and primitive decision centers. The environment no longer acted only on the organism. The organism could respond intelligently to it. The first light-sensitive spots appeared on simple creatures that lived near the surface of the sea. They could not form images, but they could tell day from night and detect the shadows of predators. Flatworms and jellyfish carried such sensors, guiding their movement by brightness alone. Over countless generations, these patches deepened into cups, focusing light more precisely. Eventually, a transparent covering evolved to protect them, and a lens formed to sharpen detail. Thus, vision slowly entered the story of life. Mechanosensation, the detection of pressure and vibration, followed a similar path. Tiny hair-like cilia swayed with currents, sending electrical impulses to nervous tissue. The ability to feel flow or collision allowed creatures to orient, to move against the tide, or to sense approaching motion. Smell and taste grew from chemistry, molecules binding to receptors, each fitting like a key in a lock. Even single-celled bacteria possessed versions of these systems, using them to steer through gradients of nutrients. From these humble origins came the extraordinary range of perceptions seen today. The modern eye of a bird, the sonar of a dolphin, the antenna of a moth, all descend from the same primal need to sense and adapt. Evolution did not design the senses all at once. It layered improvement upon necessity, sculpting awareness out of reaction. In that long process, sensation turned from reflex to representation, from mere detection to experience. Every living creature alive now carries this heritage. Within your own body, photoreceptors, chemoreceptors, and mechanoreceptors still use molecular tools older than any species. The pigments in your retina trace back to those first light-reactive proteins. The receptors on your tongue resemble the molecular detectors of ancient microbes. The difference lies only in scale and coordination. Where early life reacted locally, your nervous system unites trillions of cells into a single field of awareness. To sense is to participate in nature's dialogue. The molecules that once guided microbes through the sea now let you read, listen, and understand. Each nerve impulse echoes an ancient motion of ions across a membrane, repeating what life discovered in the beginning: that existence requires awareness, however small. As the oceans gave rise to complexity, sensing became the thread connecting every organism to its world. Now, when you blink or breathe, remember that this effortless noticing is built on a history measured not in centuries but in the age of the Earth itself. The next step in that story leads inside the body, to the networks of nerve and signal that carry every sensation toward. Though every sensation, every color, sound, and breath of air must travel through the same universal code: electricity. Inside the human body, perception is a conversation of charged particles flowing across microscopic membranes. This language of voltage is what links the outer world to the inner life of the mind. From the faint flicker of a neuron in the eye to the thunderous firing of networks deep in the brain, electrical communication turns matter into meaning. Each neuron is a slender, branching cell built for transmission. At one end lie dendrites, delicate extensions that receive signals. At the other stretches a long fiber called the axon, carrying impulses outward. When a sensory receptor is stimulated, by light, by vibration, by touch, it triggers a subtle shift in chemistry. Sodium ions rush into the cell, potassium flows out, and the difference in charge across the membrane changes. That small fluctuation, known as an action potential, moves down the axon like a wave. It does not fade with distance. It regenerates at each point, maintaining strength until it reaches the axon's end. At that terminal, the electrical pulse meets a narrow gap between cells called a synapse. Here, the message transforms again. The arriving impulse releases packets of molecules, neurotransmitters, into the space. They drift across and bind to receptors on the next cell, opening channels that let ions pass. The process repeats, one neuron after another, creating networks capable of transmitting signals across the entire body. Within milliseconds, information gathered at the skin or eye arrives in the brain. This electrochemical dialogue is both precise and flexible. Some neurons respond only to gentle pressure, others fire only when a certain frequency of sound is detected. In the retina, specialized ganglion cells carry signals tuned to contrast or movement. In the cochlea, hair cells translate vibration into distinct frequency bands. The brain interprets these coded spikes not as electricity but as sight, sound, or touch, reconstructing the outside world from patterns of timing and intensity. The human nervous system contains billions of neurons connected by trillions of synapses. Their collective activity produces a dynamic landscape of signals, constantly shifting as perception changes. Some pathways carry immediate reflexive messages, like withdrawing a hand from heat. Others form circuits of interpretation and memory, where raw data becomes understanding. In these vast networks, perception gains depth and context. Supporting this activity are glial cells, often overlooked but essential. They insulate axons with layers of myelin, increasing the speed of conduction, and regulate the chemical environment around neurons. In a sense, they maintain the silence between the notes, ensuring that every electrical impulse is clear. Together, neurons and glia create the biological infrastructure of experience. At the molecular level, the same elements that shaped early life still operate here. Sodium, potassium, calcium, and chloride flow in precise proportions. Proteins open and close like gates, responding to changes in charge. Each action potential is identical in form but unique in timing and pattern, like musical notes forming endless melodies. It is this pattern, the rhythm of impulses, that the brain decodes into the texture of cloth, the warmth of sunlight, or the taste of salt. Perception, therefore, depends on synchronization. When you listen to a familiar voice, thousands of auditory neurons fire in coordinated bursts. When you gaze at a scene, millions of visual neurons align their signals to edges and color. The harmony of timing allows the brain to combine them into a stable image of reality. If that coordination falters, perception fragments, an echo without source, a flicker without form. Reflection reveals something quietly profound. Electricity, The same force that moves through storms and stars also flows within the body, carrying thought. Every feeling, every image is written in currents of energy. The nerves beneath your skin hum softly, translating the physical world into an inner one. The mind listens to this electrical chorus, and from it arises awareness. As you rest, this network continues its patient work. Even in sleep, neurons maintain their rhythm, reorganizing memories and fine-tuning sensitivity for the next day. The same currents that help you see and hear also help you dream. Each spark inside your brain is a continuation of a natural process older than time's counting, a living current linking the depths of matter to the surface of consciousness. From these silent waves of voltage will emerge the next story in our exploration: how light itself becomes vision, and how the brain turns the simple arrival of photons into the vast and colorful experience of seeing. Among all the senses, sight dominates human perception. It delivers more information to the brain than any other channel, and shapes how we imagine reality. Yet vision begins as something almost abstract, tiny packets of light energy striking a delicate sheet of tissue at the back of the eye. From this quiet collision between photons and biology arises the landscape of color, distance, and motion that defines the visible world. The human eye is a precisely engineered organ, the result of countless evolutionary refinements. Light first passes through the cornea, a transparent layer that bends incoming rays toward the center. Behind it lies the aqueous humor, a clear fluid maintaining internal pressure and providing nutrients. The iris, a ring of pigment and muscle, controls how much light enters by widening or narrowing the pupil. Just beyond it, the lens changes curvature to focus images sharply on the retina. Muscles adjust its shape continuously, thickening for nearby objects and flattening for those far away. The retina itself is an astonishing piece of neural design. It contains more than 100 million photoreceptor cells, rods and cones, embedded in a thin sheet less than half a millimeter thick. Rods are highly sensitive to light and allow vision in dim conditions, while cones provide color and fine detail under brighter illumination. 3 types of cones, each containing a different pigment molecule, respond to short, medium, or long wavelengths of light, roughly corresponding to blue, green, and red. Every hue you perceive arises from the combined activation of these receptors. When a photon meets a pigment molecule called rhodopsin in a rod cell, it changes the molecule's shape. That microscopic twist triggers a biochemical cascade, closing ion channels and altering the cell's electrical potential. The result is a signal that travels to bipolar cells, then to ganglion cells, whose axons converge to form the optic nerve. Each eye sends a bundle of more than 1 million nerve fibers carrying visual information to the brain. Along the way, some fibers cross at the optic chiasm, ensuring that both halves of the brain receive input from both eyes. This crossing enables depth perception and a unified field of view. In the lateral geniculate nucleus of the thalamus, signals are sorted and refined before reaching the visual cortex at the back of the brain. There, specialized regions detect edges, orientation, motion, and color contrast. Neurons fire selectively, some responding only to vertical lines, others to movement in a particular direction. The brain assembles these fragments into patterns, then into objects, and finally into coherent scenes. What you see is not projected onto the brain like a photograph. It is constructed moment by moment through active interpretation. Vision also depends on constant movement. Even when your gaze seems still, the eyes perform microscopic shifts called microsaccades. These tiny motions prevent photoreceptors from adapting completely and keep the image fresh. Without them, the world would fade into gray uniformity within seconds. Larger eye movements, guided by motor neurons and the cerebellum, allow quick scanning of the environment, focusing attention on what matters most. Each movement represents a decision: where to look, what to prioritize, what to ignore. Depth perception emerges from comparison. Because your eyes are set a small distance apart, each sees the world from a slightly different angle. The brain merges these two perspectives, using disparity to judge distance. It also relies on cues such as relative size, shading, and motion parallax, the apparent shift of nearby objects against distant backgrounds as you move. These subtle calculations occur instantly, turning flat images on the retina into three-dimensional awareness. Light itself is neutral. It carries no color or emotion. The sensation of blue or gold arises entirely within the nervous system, depending on how receptors and neurons interpret wavelength and intensity. Even brightness is relative. A gray object appears lighter against black and darker against white, though the physical light it reflects remains the same. Vision, then, is an act of creation. The brain transforms fluctuating energy into form and meaning, guided by expectation and memory. Because vision is so dominant, it often shapes the other senses. Sounds seem to come from where the eyes point. Flavors look different under colored light. Balance depends partly on what the eyes report. This hierarchy is not fixed, but in humans, sight provides the organizing map on which other perceptions align. Through it, we navigate the physical world and the symbolic one, reading, recognizing faces, interpreting gestures. At its core, the architecture of sight reveals a partnership between physics and biology. Photons born in distant stars travel across space, bounce from objects, and finally dissolve within the retina. The energy that began as light in the universe becomes vision in the mind. When you open your eyes to the morning or close them against brightness, you are participating in a cosmic exchange, the meeting of outer light and inner awareness. Color is not a property of the world but a construction of the brain. Light itself contains only energy, moving in waves of different lengths. When these wavelengths strike the retina, three kinds of cone cells respond, each tuned to a particular band of frequencies. Short wavelengths activate receptors most sensitive to blue, medium ones to green, and long to red. The brain reads the ratios of their activation and combines them into the continuous spectrum we perceive as color. Between those three signals, millions of possible shades arise, not because the world holds them, but because our biology invents them. Within the retina, signals from cones mix through layers of interneurons before they ever leave the eye. Some cells compare input from neighboring receptors, sharpening contrast. Others compute differences between long and medium wavelengths to create the sensations of red-green or blue-yellow. These comparisons reduce redundancy and emphasize edges where color or brightness changes sharply. By the time information reaches the optic nerve, it already carries an outline of structure and form, ready for higher interpretation. In the brain's visual cortex, specialized regions extend this process. One area focuses on orientation, another on motion, and a cluster deep in the occipital lobe called V4 plays a central role in color perception. Here, neurons respond not to raw wavelengths but to perceived hues adjusted for lighting conditions. This adjustment, known as color constancy, allows an apple to remain red, whether viewed at dawn or under artificial light. The brain corrects for the color of illumination, subtracting bias so that objects appear stable in a shifting environment. It is a remarkable feat of unconscious calculation. The physics changes, yet perception stays coherent. Depth, too, is a synthesis. Our two eyes provide slightly different images, separated by about 6 centimeters. The brain measures the disparity between them to compute distance, an ability called stereopsis. Even with one eye closed, however, other cues fill the gap. Parallel lines converge toward the horizon. Smaller objects seem farther away, and textures grow finer with distance. Motion supplies another clue. As we move, nearby objects glide quickly across our field of view while distant ones drift slowly. This motion parallax gives an instinctive sense of scale and position. Together, these clues form a three-dimensional stage upon which life unfolds. The construction of visual reality does not end there. Higher cortical areas integrate memory, expectation, and context. A familiar shape can be recognized from a partial glimpse. A shadow can be ignored if the brain deems it irrelevant. This top-down influence explains many visual illusions. When parallel lines appear to bend inward or when a still image seems to ripple, it is the brain imposing interpretation where data are ambiguous. Perception is not a recording, but an informed guess that the mind continuously updates. Consider the phenomenon of after-images. If you stare at a green field and then look away, you may briefly see pink. This happens because the receptors for green become fatigued, and their counterparts for red temporarily dominate. The illusion reveals the constant balancing act inside the visual system, adaptation designed to preserve sensitivity. Without it, bright scenes would blind us, and dim ones would vanish from awareness. Every adjustment keeps the world visible across an enormous range of light. Vision also interacts with emotion. Warm colors such as reds and oranges tend to increase alertness, while cool blues invite calm. These effects stem partly from cultural association but also from physiology. Long wavelength light slightly stimulates arousal systems, short wavelengths slow them. Artists and architects have used this knowledge intuitively for centuries, shaping mood through hue and light. What feels aesthetic is often biological harmony between eye and environment. Reflecting on this complexity reveals how much interpretation hides behind what seems effortless. When you look at a tree, millions of receptors fire, thousands of neurons compare contrasts, and networks in the cortex assemble form, depth, and meaning, all in less than a heartbeat. The mind then adds personal context, memory of scent, sound of wind, or warmth of sunlight. Perception becomes experience, a fusion of physics and feeling. In this architecture, truth is functional rather than absolute. You see the world not as it is, but as it matters to you. Edges sharpen around relevance. Colors adjust for stability. Shadows dissolve when distraction would hinder understanding. The picture within your mind is both faithful and inventive, balancing accuracy with efficiency. It is reality filtered through need and shaped by wonder. As vision constructs its world, it teaches the same principle that guides all senses. The brain is not a passive receiver, but a creative interpreter. To perceive is to translate, to model, and to imagine. In the next part of our journey, this principle will extend beyond light into vibration itself, as we turn from the language of color and form to the invisible patterns that become sound, the sense of hearing, and the physics of resonance. The human brain is not a mirror of the world, but a maker of models. Every sense gathers fragments of data, and the brain assembles them into patterns that feel solid, continuous, and true. Yet this creative process can be fooled. Illusions expose how perception fills in gaps, how expectation bends interpretation, and how the mind prefers coherence to accuracy. They are not failures of the senses, but demonstrations of how vision, hearing, and touch cooperate to invent a stable reality. Consider the simplest example. Two lines of equal length appear different when arrowheads point inward or outward. This is the Muller-Lyer illusion, discovered in the 19th century. The brain interprets the angles as perspective cues, like corners receding or protruding, and adjusts perceived distance accordingly. The eyes see equality, the mind insists on difference. In the same way, the checker shadow illusion tricks perception into seeing two identical gray squares as light and dark. The brain corrects for the imagined presence of shadow, maintaining constancy in an inconsistent image. These effects reveal that vision values context above geometry. Hearing can be deceived just as easily. When alternating tones change pattern, the auditory system may group them into rhythms that are not there. The shepherd tone, a superimposed set of rising scales, seems to climb endlessly, though its frequency merely cycles. Even silence has illusions, the phantom ring of a phone, the imagined call of a familiar voice. In each case, the mind seeks pattern, completing what is incomplete. Perception is prediction, an act of expectation performed millions of times per second. Touch and proprioception also construct their truths. When you cross your fingers and touch a small sphere, you may feel two. The skin's map of orientation clashes with reality. The rubber hand illusion demonstrates the same principle. Stroke a fake hand in synchrony with your hidden real one, and the brain adopts the false limb as its own. Ownership, it seems, can be reassigned through sensory coincidence. The self we feel is shaped by timing, texture, and trust between signals. Behind every illusion lies a principle of efficiency. The nervous system must interpret enormous amounts of data with limited time and energy. To manage this, it relies on shortcuts, context, memory, and probability. Usually they serve us well, producing quick, accurate judgments. Occasionally they mislead, and the resulting illusions become windows into perception's inner code. Neuroscientists use these phenomena to map how the brain weights contrast, motion, and expectation. The study of error reveals the architecture of success. Color illusions show how the visual system maintains constancy. When the same pigment reflects different light, the brain corrects automatically, preserving stability in a changing world. Artists have long exploited this effect, using surrounding hues to alter how a color appears. Painters from the Impressionist era discovered that shadows are not gray but filled with complementary tones. They were, in effect, collaborating with the biology of vision, painting as the brain perceives rather than as physics dictates. Temporal illusions remind us that perception unfolds over time, not in frozen frames. The brain integrates sensory input across brief intervals, smoothing discontinuities. A flash of light followed by a brief delay of sound becomes a single event, the crack of lightning's thunder. By stretching or compressing time, the mind ensures continuity. What we experience as the present is therefore a carefully edited segment of history, stitched together by neural prediction. Reflection reveals something intimate about these distortions. They mirror the rhythm of thought itself. The brain's need for meaning overrides raw accuracy, creating a world that feels coherent even when uncertain. Illusions are evidence of imagination operating at a biological level. Without them, the world would be confusing noise. With them, it becomes story and space. As the day quiets and light fades, this constructive nature of perception begins to soften. The brain relaxes its constant correction, allowing edges to blur and patterns to drift. When attention loosens, internal images start to mix with those from the outside world. The gentle threshold between waking and dreaming. If your eyes grow heavy while listening, that is completely fine. The senses are easing their vigilance, letting the mind rest from its endless task of prediction. Even in that stillness, the machinery of perception continues its quiet work, reshaping fragments of memory into calm imagery. Illusions remind us that what we see and feel is never fixed. It is a living negotiation between body, mind, and world. As that negotiation slows tonight, perception itself becomes a soft echo fading into rest. What began as error turns into peace, the brain finding comfort in its own imagination. The world around you is filled with movement. Even when everything seems still, air trembles with minute oscillations, surfaces hum with microscopic resonance, and your body itself produces quiet vibrations, the pulse of blood, the rush of breath, the whisper of muscle. Hearing is the sense that transforms these fluctuations of pressure into experience. Through it, the invisible motion of air becomes the structure of speech, the emotion of music, and the awareness of space. Sound begins with disturbance. When something vibrates, a vocal cord, a guitar string, a falling branch, it pushes against the surrounding air. Each pulse compresses molecules, then releases them, creating a wave that travels outward in all directions. The wave carries energy, not matter. The air particles themselves move only slightly, passing the vibration from one to another. When that rhythmic variation in pressure reaches the ear, an intricate chain of transformations begins, turning mechanical energy into nerve signals the brain can interpret. The human ear is divided into three regions: outer, middle, and inner. The outer ear consists of the visible auricle, shaped to capture sound and funnel it into the ear canal. Its curves and ridges help determine the direction of incoming sound, providing subtle cues for locating its source. The wave then reaches the eardrum, a thin membrane stretched tight. Every fluctuation of pressure causes it to vibrate, matching the pattern of the original source. Behind the eardrum lies the middle ear, an air-filled chamber containing three tiny bones, the malleus, incus, and stapes, known as the hammer, anvil, and stirrup. They form a mechanical lever system that amplifies the minute vibrations and transmits them to the oval window of the inner ear. This amplification is necessary because the transition from air to the fluid-filled inner ear would otherwise cause most of the energy to reflect away. These bones, the smallest in the human body, bridge the gap between the world's motion and our perception of sound. Beyond the oval window begins the cochlea, a spiral-shaped chamber no larger than a pea, yet containing the essence of hearing. Inside its coiled tubes flows a watery fluid that ripples as vibrations arrive. Running along its length is the basilar membrane, a delicate structure that varies in stiffness, narrow and taut at one end, wider and more flexible at the other. This gradient allows different frequencies to resonate at specific locations, much like keys along a piano. High tones peak near the base, low tones reach their maximum near the apex. On top of the basilar membrane sits the organ of Corti, lined with thousands of sensory hair cells. Each cell bears fine projections called stereocilia. As the membrane moves, these hairs bend, opening ion channels that convert motion into electrical signals. These signals pass through the auditory nerve to the brainstem and then to the auditory cortex. The pattern of activation encodes frequency, amplitude, and rhythm. From this invisible code, the brain constructs sound, the rustle of leaves, the crack of thunder, the cadence of a familiar voice. Hearing is astonishingly sensitive. The faintest audible sound corresponds to vibrations as small as 1/10 of the diameter of a hydrogen atom. The ear can detect frequencies ranging from about 20 to 20,000 cycles per second, a span of 10 musical octaves. Within that range, it discerns both subtle differences in pitch and vast variations in volume. The logarithmic response of the auditory system allows whispers and roars to be understood through the same biological mechanism. The sense of hearing also gives direction and distance. Because the ears are separated by the width of the head, sound reaches one ear slightly earlier and at a slightly lower intensity than the other. The brain compares these differences to determine location in space. The shape of the outer ear modifies frequencies depending on vertical angle, helping to distinguish whether a sound comes from above or below. Together, these cues create a three-dimensional auditory map of the environment, essential for orientation and survival. Beyond physics, hearing connects deeply to emotion. The human brain responds instinctively to rhythm and tone. Certain intervals feel tense, others resolve and soothe. Music exploits these biological preferences, guiding attention and emotion through time. The voice carries shades of feeling in pitch and tempo long before words are understood. Infants recognize the melody of speech before they grasp meaning, showing that sound communicates on levels older than language itself. Hearing is also one of the first senses to develop and among the last to fade. Fetuses respond to rhythm and voice while still in the womb, surrounded by the low hum of the mother's body. Later in life, familiar songs can evoke vivid memories, reactivating the neural patterns formed decades earlier. The ear thus becomes not only a sensor but a bridge between past and present, translating vibration into remembrance. When you listen, you participate in a physical miracle. Air moves, bones pivot, hair cells sway, and electrical signals flash. What began as motion in space becomes meaning in the mind. Hearing reveals that silence itself is never absolute. It is the pause between waves, the readiness for the next vibration. Through this sense, the universe speaks in rhythm, and the body listens. Sound becomes meaningful when the brain recognizes pattern. Out of a continuous stream of vibrations, it identifies rhythm, melody, and tone, the signatures of organized sound we call music. Unlike random noise, music repeats and varies in ways that predict and surprise. This balance between expectation and novelty creates pleasure. The auditory system does more than detect. It analyzes, measures, and remembers, transforming air into emotion. The human brain is designed to find order in time. The auditory cortex divides sound into frequencies, then reassembles them through networks that detect pitch and rhythm. Each vibration arriving at the ear is a wave of pressure. Yet what you perceive depends on how neurons synchronize their firing. Low frequencies cause slow oscillations, while high ones stimulate rapid patterns. These timing codes are sent to the brainstem, thalamus, and ultimately to the auditory cortex, where information becomes perception. Within milliseconds, the mind identifies harmonic relationships between notes. When two frequencies stand in simple ratios, such as 2 to 1 for an octave or 3 to 2 for a fifth, they resonate together. These mathematical relationships please the ear because they align with the physical properties of the cochlea, where waves of compatible spacing reinforce one another. Dissonance, by contrast, occurs when frequencies interfere, producing tension that the brain seeks to resolve. This interplay between consonance and dissonance forms the heartbeat of melody. Rhythm organizes time into expectation. The brain anticipates beats and measures, predicting when the next sound will occur. Studies show that the motor regions of the cortex activate even when you merely listen, preparing muscles for movement. This link between hearing and motion explains why rhythm invites the body to tap, sway, or dance. Music and movement evolved together, shaping social bonds long before language refined communication. Early humans probably sang and drummed before they spoke in sentences, using rhythm to coordinate work and celebration. Emotion arises when these neural predictions are gently broken. A melody that delays its resolution or a chord that shifts unexpectedly activates reward centers deep in the brain. Dopamine is released, producing the shiver of pleasure known to every listener. The same chemical that rewards survival behaviors, eating, socializing, learning, responds to art. Music, therefore, transforms pattern recognition into joy, tying abstract vibration to the most ancient circuits of motivation. The auditory cortex does not work alone. It connects to the amygdala, hippocampus, and prefrontal regions responsible for emotion and memory. This network explains why a single song can return you to a moment long past. The same sequence of notes can quicken the pulse or calm it, depending on association. A lullaby slows heart rate and breathing, aligning physiology with rhythm. A march synchronizes bodies into collective movement. Music's power lies in its ability to regulate internal states through external pattern. Cultural diversity broadens this biological foundation. Different societies emphasize varied scales, instruments, and rhythmic structures, yet all draw on the same neurological principles. Repetition creates familiarity. Variation sustains interest. The universality of octave perception and rhythmic grouping suggests that the brain's architecture constrains what counts as music. What differs is the cultural vocabulary, the specific shapes of sound that carry meaning within a community. Hearing is a dynamic sense. It occurs only through time. You cannot freeze a chord or pause a drumbeat without losing its essence. This temporal nature parallels human thought itself, which unfolds sequentially. Music mirrors the structure of consciousness: anticipation, tension, resolution. Perhaps that is why it reaches us so deeply. It resonates with the way we experience existence, moment by moment. Beyond pleasure, organized sound has measurable effects on the body. Slow rhythms encourage parasympathetic activity, lowering blood pressure and calming stress. Rapid tempos and bright harmonies stimulate alertness. Therapists use these physiological effects in medicine, rehabilitation, and mental health. The body does not merely listen, it entrains to sound. Heartbeats, breathing, and even neural oscillations align with rhythm, demonstrating that hearing extends far beyond the ear. The sense of hearing, then, is not just detection, it is interpretation through time. From the mechanical vibration of a string to the neural dance within the cortex, each layer of the auditory system translates motion into meaning. Music, language, and environmental sound all travel the same pathways, revealing how finely tuned human biology is to temporal order. Reflecting on this reveals something profound about perception. The mind continually seeks pattern and connection. In recognizing structure, it finds comfort. In discovering variation, it finds curiosity. Hearing transforms the invisible flow of vibration into emotional architecture. Every sound you have ever loved is both physical and symbolic, a bridge between the measurable and the felt. Through hearing, the world speaks in rhythm, and through rhythm, the body remembers what it means to be alive. Standing upright may feel effortless, yet it requires constant calculation. Beneath every step, the body performs a silent act of geometry, measuring gravity, acceleration, and position through a sense few people consciously notice: balance. This faculty, known as the vestibular sense, keeps the eyes steady, coordinates movement, and informs the brain of the body's orientation in space. Without it, even the simplest motion would collapse into confusion. The organ of balance resides deep within the inner ear, beside the cochlea that handles hearing. It consists of two main systems: the semicircular canals and the otolith organs. Each semicircular canal is a loop of fluid-filled tubing positioned at right angles to the others, aligned roughly with the three planes of space. When the head rotates, the fluid lags slightly behind, bending fine hair cells within a swelling called the ampulla. These cells convert mechanical deflection into electrical impulses that signal rotational movement. Turning the head to the right activates one canal, tilting forward another. Together they provide a complete map of angular motion. The otolith organs, the utricle and saccule, detect linear acceleration and the pull of gravity. Inside each lies a gelatinous membrane studded with tiny calcium carbonate crystals called otoconia. When you move or tilt, inertia causes these crystals to shift, bending hair cells embedded beneath them. The resulting signals tell the brain which direction you are moving and whether you are upright or inclined. Even when standing perfectly still, gravity continually stimulates the otoliths, giving a sense of up and down that anchors all other perceptions of space. These vestibular messages travel along the eighth cranial nerve to the brainstem, where they merge with information from the eyes, muscles, and joints. The cerebellum refines this input, adjusting muscle tone and coordination. Reflexes derived from these pathways operate in milliseconds. If you stumble, the body corrects itself before you have time to think. The eyes also link tightly to the vestibular system through the vestibulo-ocular reflex. When the head moves, this reflex causes the eyes to shift in the opposite direction, stabilizing vision. Without it, the world would blur with every nod or step. Disruption of this system reveals its importance. Inner ear infections, rapid spinning, or mismatched sensory cues can all produce dizziness or vertigo. When visual and vestibular signals conflict, such as when reading in a moving car, the brain struggles to decide which to trust, resulting in motion sickness. Astronauts experience similar confusion in weightlessness, where gravity's constant reference disappears. Over time, adaptation restores equilibrium as the brain recalibrates expectations. Balance, like all perception, is flexible. At the neural level, the vestibular system continuously updates a three-dimensional model of the body's position. This model allows smooth coordination between posture and gaze. It informs the sense of proprioception, the internal awareness of limbs and movement, creating unity between motion and perception. The precision of this interaction enables complex actions: walking a narrow beam, catching a ball, or keeping focus while the world moves. From an evolutionary perspective, equilibrium evolved early. Aquatic animals use similar organs to orient within currents. The lateral lines of fish detect flow and vibration akin to human vestibular sensors. In terrestrial creatures, these mechanisms adapted to the challenge of gravity. The human upright stance, with its high center of mass, depends heavily on constant vestibular feedback. Every step you take is corrected dozens of times by imperceptible muscular adjustments guided by these inner sensors. Reflection reveals that balance is both physical and symbolic. It represents harmony between opposing forces, motion and stillness, control and surrender. The same inner ear that warns of falling also allows graceful movement. Dancers, athletes, and even those simply walking across uneven ground rely on an internal dialogue between chaos and correction. The sensation of stability is not the absence of motion, but the successful integration of countless small shifts. Even in quiet moments, the vestibular system continues to operate, keeping the eyes fixed on a horizon that may not exist in the dark. Its constancy makes possible the illusion of stillness. When the world seems calm, it is because equilibrium works perfectly, translating continuous motion into serenity. The sense of balance is a silent guardian, never resting, never seen. It keeps the body aligned with gravity, the gaze steady, and the mind oriented in space. In its precision lies the foundation of every other movement. Through this hidden sense, we learn that stability is not immobility, it is motion mastered, a living poise between change and control. Each breath you take carries the world inside you. Invisible molecules drift through the air, slip past the nostrils, and dissolve in a thin layer of moisture deep within the nasal cavity. There, millions of sensory neurons wait, each designed to recognize certain chemical shapes. Scent begins when those molecules fit into the receptors like keys into locks. What follows is one of the oldest and most direct forms of perception, the translation of chemistry into experience. The human sense of smell depends on a specialized tissue known as the olfactory epithelium. It occupies a small patch high within the nasal passages, lined with receptor neurons whose cilia extend into the air. Each receptor contains a protein tuned to detect specific molecular structures. When an odorant binds to one of these proteins, it triggers a cascade of biochemical reactions inside the cell, producing an electrical signal. This signal travels along tiny fibers that pass through holes in the skull's ethmoid bone and converge in the olfactory bulb, a structure at the base of the brain. Unlike other senses, smell bypasses the thalamus, the usual relay station for sensory information. Instead, the olfactory bulb sends signals directly to the limbic system, the brain's emotional and memory centers, including the amygdala and hippocampus. This shortcut explains why odors can provoke feelings or recollections before conscious thought has time to act. A trace of smoke may trigger alertness long before you identify fire. The aroma of bread can summon warmth and comfort without a single word. Smell reaches emotion through biology's most ancient door. The complexity of this system is astonishing. Humans possess about 400 functional types of olfactory receptors, and the brain interprets patterns of their activation rather than single inputs. Each odor molecule stimulates a unique combination of receptors, and the brain decodes this pattern as a specific scent. This combinatorial code allows recognition of thousands, even millions, of different smells. The system is so sensitive that it can detect a few molecules of certain substances in a trillion molecules of air. Such precision once served survival, locating food, sensing danger, recognizing kin. Scent is also deeply tied to taste. Flavor is not a single sense, but the fusion of taste and smell working together. When you eat, volatile compounds travel from the mouth to the nasal cavity through a passage at the back of the throat, allowing the olfactory system to contribute to flavor perception. This is why food seems dull when the nose is congested. Without olfactory input, only the basic tastes, sweet, sour, salty, bitter, and umami remain. The chemistry of air and the chemistry of nourishment are inseparable. Odor molecules vary widely. Some are small and volatile, others heavy and persistent. Their structure determines not only what they smell like, but also how they interact with receptors. Esters and aldehydes give fruit its fragrance. Sulfur compounds create the sharpness of garlic or onion. Certain molecules are repellent to humans but attractive to other species. To a moth, a pheromone trace invisible to us may be a signal that travels for kilometers. Each organism perceives a distinct chemical universe shaped by its needs. The olfactory system also adapts rapidly. Prolonged exposure to a smell reduces sensitivity as receptors and neurons adjust their response. This adaptation prevents overload and allows attention to shift toward new scents. It is why you stop noticing perfume on your own skin after a few minutes, or cease to register the background smell of your home. The brain filters familiarity to conserve focus, maintaining awareness only of change. From an evolutionary view, smell is one of the earliest senses to emerge. Single-celled organisms already responded to chemical gradients long before complex life evolved. The lineage that led to mammals refined this ability for communication and survival. Predators track prey by scent. Pollinators locate flowers through airborne signals. Humans, though less dependent, still read the air unconsciously, sensing freshness, danger, or comfort. Reflectively, smell reveals an intimate truth about perception. To know something by scent is to let part of it enter you. Molecules that once rested on a leaf, a person, or a storm cloud now mingle with your body, bridging inner and outer worlds. Every inhalation is participation in the planet's chemistry. The air carries memory, the smoke of distant fires, the salt of ancient seas, the fragrance of rain. Smell is the most ancient whisper of communication between life and environment. Through it, the body listens to the world without words, translating molecular traces into feelings and thought. Each breath reminds us that perception is not just observation but communion, a constant blending of self and world through the chemistry of the air. Smell holds a unique power over memory. Long after words fade or faces blur, a single fragrance can resurrect an entire moment with startling clarity. The reason lies deep within the brain's structure. Of all the senses, smell alone travels a direct route to the limbic system, where emotion and memory intertwine. This anatomical shortcut ensures that scent reaches the heart before it reaches the intellect, weaving feelings and recollections into one seamless experience. When odor molecules trigger the receptors of the olfactory epithelium, their signals pass first to the olfactory bulb, which processes patterns of activation. From there, neural pathways extend to the amygdala, responsible for emotional response, and to the hippocampus, which forms and stores long-term memory. Because of this close proximity, new scents become entangled with the emotions present at the moment of learning. Years later, encountering the same aroma can reawaken the original emotional state almost instantly. This connection explains why the smell of pine can recall winter mornings, or why the faint trace of a particular perfume may bring back someone long gone. The memory seems to arrive whole, sound, color, and feeling included, because the brain retrieves not only the event but also its sensory atmosphere. Scientists call this phenomenon odor-evoked autobiographical memory, and studies show it is more vivid and emotional than memories prompted by visual or verbal cues. Smell, in essence, restores the past through chemistry. The limbic system's influence gives scent a direct role in mood regulation. Pleasant aromas such as lavender, vanilla, or citrus can reduce stress by activating parasympathetic pathways, lowering heart rate and blood pressure. Pungent or spoiled smells, conversely, trigger avoidance behaviors through activation of the insula and amygdala. These reactions are evolutionary safeguards. The same circuits that warn of decay also respond to comfort. The emotional valence of odor is ancient, guiding survival long before reasoning developed. Beyond emotion, smell shapes social and personal identity. Each individual has a characteristic body scent determined by genetics, diet, and microbiota. Subtle variations in these natural odors influence attraction and recognition, often below conscious awareness. Newborns can identify their mothers by smell within days of birth. Adults recognize partners or family members by faint chemical cues. Though modern life masks these signals with artificial fragrances, their influence endures. The invisible chemistry of scent continues to bind people together through instinct as much as memory. The hippocampus, where smell and memory converge, constantly rewires itself. Every new association strengthens some connections and weakens others. When you encounter a familiar fragrance in a new context, the brain layers the new experience atop the old, creating blended memories. This fusion gives scent its complexity. A smell is never simply pleasant or unpleasant. It carries the weight of all moments linked to it. The aroma of rain might soothe one person and sadden another, depending on what life once paired with it. The olfactory system does not distinguish past from present, it simply replays the pattern. Cultural traditions have long used scent as a form of emotional storytelling. Incense in temples, herbs in medicine, and the ritual use of perfume all rely on the brain's ancient chemistry. Religious ceremonies employ smoke and fragrance to evoke reverence and continuity. Culinary practices preserve heritage through familiar aromas. Modern neuroscience confirms what ancient cultures intuited. The pathway from nose to memory is among the most direct routes to the mind. Reflectively, this union of chemistry and recollection reveals something profound about identity. We are not only thinkers but collectors of sensory fragments. The world imprints itself through the nose, as surely as through the eyes. To remember is to breathe the past again. When you smell cut grass, the molecules entering your lungs may be identical to those that drifted through childhood summers. Inhaling them bridges time, merging the present body with the memory it holds. Smell's intimacy lies in its invisibility. It asks no attention, yet it defines atmosphere and emotion in every setting. A home, a forest, a person, all carry signatures that become extensions of memory. The nose, often overlooked, is a curator of life's moments, storing them not as words, but as sensations waiting to be rediscovered. Through scent, the brain performs an act of gentle resurrection, reviving the texture of time. What begins as a molecule in the air becomes a doorway to feeling. To smell is to remember, and to remember is to live a moment twice, the first in experience, the second in awareness. Taste begins at the meeting point of chemistry and appetite. Each time food touches the tongue, a microscopic world of molecules interacts with living sensors that decide whether what we eat is safe, nourishing, or harmful. These judgments are ancient, hardwired into the brain long before thought arises. Through taste, the body reads the chemistry of the environment and translates it into desire or rejection, a language that has guided survival for millions of years. The surface of the tongue is covered with tiny bumps called papillae, within which lie clusters of taste buds. Each taste bud contains about 50 to 100 specialized receptor cells. When food dissolves in saliva, molecules enter small pores at the top of each bud and bind to receptors on the cells. This contact starts a chain of chemical reactions that convert molecular structure into electrical activity. The impulses travel along 3 cranial nerves, the facial, glossopharyngeal, and vagus, to the brainstem, then to the thalamus, and finally to the gustatory cortex, where taste becomes experience. Humans recognize 5 primary taste qualities: sweet, sour, salty, bitter, and umami. Sweetness signals energy-rich carbohydrates. Sourness warns of unripe or spoiled food. Saltiness indicates essential minerals. Bitterness often flags potential toxins. Umami, discovered later, marks the savory flavor of amino acids, especially glutamate, associated with protein. Each taste receptor uses a different molecular mechanism. Sweet, bitter, and umami rely on G-protein-coupled receptors that trigger intracellular cascades, while salt and sour respond to direct ion flow through membrane channels. Together, they allow the tongue to sample chemistry with remarkable precision. Yet what we call flavor extends far beyond these 5 categories. When we chew, aroma compounds rise through the back of the throat to reach the olfactory epithelium, blending taste with smell. Texture and temperature add further dimensions, detected by the trigeminal nerve, which senses pressure and spice-induced heat. The crispness of an apple, the warmth of soup, the sting of pepper, all combine into a unified experience. Remove smell, as during a cold, and flavor collapses to simplicity. What remains are the raw tastes, stripped of nuance. The pleasure of eating is partly psychological. The brain releases dopamine when sweetness or umami appear, rewarding the consumption of energy and protein. Endorphins accompany warmth, fat, and gentle spice. These reactions evolved to encourage nourishment, but in modern abundance they can mislead, drawing us toward excess sugar or salt. Even so, the chemistry of reward reflects the deep link between taste and emotion. To eat is to feel comfort, to reassure the body that it is sustained. Cultural experience reshapes these instincts. What one society finds delicious, another may find strange or bitter. Repeated exposure alters neural weighting within the gustatory cortex, turning unfamiliar flavors into favorites. Fermented foods, coffee, or spicy dishes once rejected become pleasures through adaptation. The brain learns not only to recognize molecules but to associate them with memory, company, and place. Taste thus becomes an archive of experience, geography preserved on the tongue. From a biological perspective, taste plays a defensive role as well. The bitterness of certain plants prevents poisoning. The acidity of spoiled food triggers disgust. Infants display universal facial expressions for each basic taste: a smile for sweetness, a grimace for bitterness. These reactions are built into the nervous system, ensuring survival before learning or culture intervene. Every species tailors its taste spectrum to its diet. Cats, for instance, lack functional sweet receptors because their meat-based nutrition never required them. Reflectively, taste reveals how perception begins in contact. To know something by taste is to let it touch the self, to dissolve a fragment of the world on the tongue. It is intimacy made chemical, trust expressed in flavor. The mouth becomes a gate through which matter becomes meaning. As the body moves toward rest, these chemical signals quiet. Digestion slows, saliva production eases, and the taste buds grow still. The mind turns inward, leaving behind the immediate evaluations of sweet or sour. If you are listening as you drift toward sleep, that is completely fine. The senses know when to release their vigilance. Even in slumber, faint signals continue their watch. The taste of dryness prompting you to swallow. The scent of smoke ready to wake you if danger nears. Taste and smell, though ancient, never entirely rest. They remain guardians of survival, even in dreams. Their calm persistence keeps the body connected to the world, maintaining the boundary between awareness and repose. Tonight, as the flavors of memory fade and quiet returns, the chemistry of perception continues its gentle work, ensuring that both waking and sleeping serve the same purpose, to keep life balanced between nourishment and rest. Of all the senses, touch is the one that never truly turns off. The moment you came into the world, it was the first sense to speak. The pressure of air on your skin, the warmth of a hand that held you, the steady rhythm of a heartbeat against your cheek. Long before words formed or eyes focused, touch conveyed safety, comfort, and belonging. It remains the body's most constant conversation with its environment, a dialogue carried on through the skin. The human skin is the largest sensory organ, covering nearly 2 square meters and containing millions of specialized receptors. Beneath its thin surface lies a network of nerves and cells designed to register mechanical, thermal, and chemical changes. Among these are the mechanoreceptors, Merkel cells that detect sustained pressure and fine detail, Meissner's corpuscles that respond to gentle stroking, Ruffini endings that sense skin stretch, and Pacinian corpuscles that detect deep vibration. Together they allow you to distinguish textures as different as silk, bark, or sand, and to recognize shapes without sight. These receptors transduce physical contact into electrical impulses that travel through peripheral nerves toward the spinal cord. From there, information ascends to the thalamus and on to the somatosensory cortex in the brain. Within that cortex, every part of the body has its own representation. The hands, lips, and face occupy enormous territories compared with the back or legs because they contain far more receptors. This distorted yet accurate map, often illustrated as the sensory homunculus, shows how touch defines our sense of physical identity. Temperature adds another layer of information. Thermoreceptors scattered throughout the skin signal warmth or cold based on small changes in temperature. Some respond when heat rises above a comfortable threshold, others when it falls. This dual system not only helps regulate body temperature but also contributes to emotional tone. Warmth tends to produce comfort, while coolness can alert or invigorate. Both sensations carry subtle psychological weight, influencing mood as surely as color or sound. Touch is not merely detection, it is communication. The body's tactile vocabulary ranges from protective reflexes to gestures of connection. A gentle brush of the arm releases oxytocin, a hormone that fosters trust and bonding. Infants deprived of physical contact fail to thrive, even when given adequate food. Adults, too, rely on touch for reassurance, the handshake, the embrace, the supportive pat on the back. Each gesture transmits unspoken emotion through pressure, rhythm, and warmth. The brain receives these signals not only in sensory regions but also in the emotional circuits of the insular and anterior cingulate cortex, blending physical and psychological perception. Pain, an aspect of touch often feared, is equally vital. Specialized nociceptors detect tissue damage or extreme conditions and send urgent signals through fast and slow nerve fibers. Sharp pain demands immediate reaction. Dull ache reminds the body to rest and heal. The brain interprets these messages through networks that integrate sensation, emotion, and attention. In the absence of pain, injury would pass unnoticed. Suffering, though unpleasant, serves as a teacher, a guardian of integrity. Touch also works inward. Deep within muscles and joints, proprioceptive receptors measure stretch and tension, informing the brain of position and movement. This internal sense merges with external touch to create a unified perception of the body in space. Without it, coordination falters, and even standing upright becomes uncertain. Together, tactile and proprioceptive systems maintain the continuous awareness that allows motion to feel effortless. The skin's sensitivity is not uniform. Fingertips can detect microscopic ridges, the back senses only broad pressure. Yet even the least sensitive areas contribute to the overall mosaic of awareness. Every square centimeter of skin participates in monitoring, protection, and expression. It shields the body from the world, yet connects it at every instant, a paradox of boundary and intimacy. Reflectively, touch reminds us that to perceive is also to be perceived. When you place your hand on an object, the object presses back with equal force. Every touch is mutual. Every contact defines both surfaces. Through this reciprocity, we discover that perception is interaction, not observation. The skin becomes a border where the self and the world meet and exchange signals of presence. In the quiet of daily life, you rarely notice the continuous stream of tactile data, the pressure of clothing, the chair beneath you, the rhythm of breath against fabric. These unnoticed sensations are the background hum of existence. The constancy of touch provides the foundation on which other senses build their shifting stories. It is the body's oldest language, spoken without sound, understood without translation. Through touch, the world proves it is real. Every contact, whether gentle, harsh, warm, or cold, reminds the mind that it inhabits matter. The skin's language is universal. A single gesture can calm, awaken, warn, or reassure. Within that simplicity lies the profound truth that awareness itself is a form of contact, and to feel is to know that we are alive. Pain and pleasure form the two poles of the body's sensory compass. Between them lies every subtle shade of comfort, curiosity, and care. These opposing sensations share more than contrast. They use many of the same neural pathways, relying on similar chemical messengers and overlapping brain regions. Through them, the body interprets what helps or harms, shaping behavior long before reason intervenes. Pain warns, pleasure rewards, and both ensure survival by teaching the nervous system what to seek and what to avoid. Pain begins when specialized nerve endings, known as nociceptors, detect potential damage. These receptors lie throughout the skin, muscles, joints, and organs, ready to respond to extremes of temperature, pressure, or chemical irritation. When activated, they produce electrical impulses that travel through peripheral nerves to the spinal cord. There, some signals trigger immediate reflexes, pulling a hand from heat before awareness even registers. Others ascend through multiple pathways, the spinothalamic tract and the spino-reticular route, to the thalamus and then to the somatosensory cortex, where pain gains shape and location. The limbic system adds emotion, transforming raw data into suffering or distress. Not all pain is equal. Sharp, localized pain travels quickly through myelinated A-delta fibers. Dull, aching pain moves more slowly along unmyelinated C fibers. Together they create the layered perception of acute injury followed by lingering soreness. Chemical mediators such as prostaglandins and bradykinin enhance sensitivity, ensuring damaged tissue receives protection. At the same time, the brain releases endorphins, natural opioids that reduce pain perception by binding to receptors in the spinal cord and brainstem. These molecules mirror the effects of medicinal opiates but originate within the body's own pharmacy. Pleasure, in many ways, mirrors pain's circuitry but flows in the opposite direction. Touch receptors sensitive to gentle pressure send signals through slower pathways that connect directly to emotional centers, releasing oxytocin and dopamine. Warmth, rhythmic motion, and soft textures activate these same circuits, producing calm and satisfaction. The contrast between the two sensations, pain's alarm and pleasure's reassurance, creates a dynamic balance that keeps the organism responsive but not overwhelmed. In the brain, the nucleus accumbens and the ventral tegmental area form the core of the reward system. When we experience something beneficial, food, social contact, accomplishment, dopamine levels rise, reinforcing behavior. This mechanism evolved to encourage repetition of life-sustaining acts. Yet the same system can be exploited by artificial rewards, drugs, excessive sugar, or risk. Biology does not distinguish between natural and manufactured stimuli. It responds to chemistry, not morality. Understanding this overlap helps explain addiction as a hijacking of the brain's pleasure pathways. The perception of pain is also influenced by context, attention, and emotion. Soldiers in battle often report little pain from severe wounds until danger passes. Athletes feel exhaustion only after competition ends. Expectation modulates experience through descending neural pathways that can dampen or amplify signals at the spinal level. Placebo effects arise from this control, demonstrating how belief and anticipation alter physiology. Pain, therefore, is not purely sensory but interpretive, a negotiation between body and mind. Chronic pain represents this system gone awry. When nerves continue to fire after healing, the brain learns to expect pain and replays it even without new injury. Research shows that regions involved in emotion and memory contribute to this persistence, blurring the line between physical and psychological suffering. Treatments increasingly target not just tissue but perception itself, through mindfulness, movement, and re-education of neural circuits. Relief comes from restoring balance to the body's signaling, not from silencing it entirely. Pleasure, though gentler, is equally instructive. It motivates connection, care, and exploration. Social touch releases neurochemicals that lower stress and build trust. Rhythmic stimulation, massage, dance, or music aligns heartbeat and breath, producing harmony between body and environment. Pleasure teaches that safety is not only the absence of harm but the presence of well-being. It reminds the nervous system what normal should feel like, guiding recovery from pain. Reflectively, the coexistence of pain and pleasure reveals the intelligence of the body. Every nerve ending carries both warning and promise. The same skin that burns at excess warmth delights in gentle heat. The same pathways that signal harm also transmit comfort. Biology's dual design ensures sensitivity to contrast. Without pain, we would not withdraw from danger. Without pleasure, we would not approach life. To live within this balance is to participate in a constant feedback loop between vulnerability and vitality. Pain writes its lessons sharply. Pleasure softens them. Together they shape memory, behavior, and empathy, allowing not only survival but compassion. For in recognizing our own capacity to hurt and to heal, we understand that every being navigates the same invisible current between distress and relief. Without looking, you can close your eyes, raise your arm, and touch your nose. You can walk through a darkened room without watching your feet, or type on a keyboard while your eyes follow something else. These acts rely on a sense that rarely enters consciousness, yet shapes every movement, proprioception, the perception of body position and motion. It is often called the sixth sense, though it works quietly beneath awareness, integrating information from muscles, tendons, joints, and skin to tell the brain where every part of the body is at any moment. Proprioception depends on a network of specialized receptors. In muscles, spindle fibers detect changes in length and the rate of stretch, signaling how contracted or relaxed each muscle is. In tendons, Golgi tendon organs monitor tension, preventing excessive force that might cause injury. Within joints, mechanoreceptors sense angle and rotation, sending constant feedback about limb position. These signals travel through peripheral nerves to the spinal cord and ascend to the cerebellum and parietal cortex, where the brain constructs a real-time map of the body's configuration. This internal mapping is continuous and self-correcting. The brain compares predicted movement, generated by motor commands, with incoming sensory feedback. When the two align, motion feels smooth and controlled. When they conflict, clumsiness, or imbalance results. Closing your eyes and trying to touch your fingertips together demonstrates how finely tuned this coordination is. Proprioceptive input allows you to know not only where your limbs are, but also how fast they are moving, forming the basis for skilled motion in everything from writing to athletics. The cerebellum, located at the back of the brain, acts as the control center for proprioception. It integrates sensory feedback with motor planning, adjusting posture and precision. Damage to this region results in ataxia, uncoordinated, wavering movement, even though strength remains intact. The condition reveals how vital the hidden sense is. Without it, the body loses its graceful connection between intention and outcome. Proprioception is deeply intertwined with other senses. Visual information provides external reference points, while the vestibular system in the inner ear supplies cues about balance and acceleration. Together, they create what neuroscientists call the body schema, a unified perception of self in space. This model enables prediction of motion and interaction with the environment. It is why you can catch a ball mid-air or dance to a rhythm without consciously calculating position. Adaptation highlights proprioception's flexibility. When a person uses a tool, such as a hammer or a tennis racket, the brain gradually includes the object within its body schema. Neurons in the parietal cortex extend their receptive fields to encompass the tool's tip, treating it as part of the self. This expansion of boundaries demonstrates how the sense of body ownership is not fixed, but extendable, a foundation for human creativity and technology. Proprioception also contributes to the experience of embodiment, the feeling that the body belongs to the self. Experiments such as the rubber hand illusion show how easily this sense can be manipulated. When a false hand is stroked in synchrony with a hidden real one, many people begin to feel that the fake hand is theirs. The brain values correlation between vision and touch over absolute truth. This flexibility helps explain conditions like phantom limb sensation, where amputees feel movement or pain in limbs that no longer exist. The body map persists even when the physical structure changes. Training refines proprioception. Athletes, dancers, and musicians develop heightened awareness of subtle movement, allowing extraordinary precision. Practices such as yoga or martial arts deliberately cultivate this internal sense, linking it to breathing and attention. Rehabilitation after injury often focuses on re-educating proprioceptive pathways, teaching muscles and joints to communicate accurately again. The nervous system's plasticity makes such recovery possible. It continually updates its models based on experience. Reflectively, proprioception reveals that self-awareness is not confined to thought. It exists within motion, posture, and muscle tone. The body knows itself through action long before the mind describes it. Every step or gesture is an act of perception, a dialogue between intention and feedback that defines the boundaries of the self. Without this constant loop, consciousness would float unanchored, detached from the material form that sustains it. Even the still body is alive with movement at microscopic levels. Muscles adjust, tendons stretch, equilibrium shifts with each heartbeat. Proprioception records these silent rhythms, ensuring continuity of presence. It tells you that you are here, in space and in gravity, occupying form. Through it, the abstract idea of self becomes tangible. This hidden sense, though easily overlooked, is the foundation upon which all physical experience stands. It connects thought to motion, inner world to outer world, idea to gesture. It allows awareness to inhabit the body fully. In every moment of balance, every effortless reach, every confident stride, proprioception whispers its steady truth. You exist in motion, and motion is your constant form of knowing. The body is not a collection of separate instruments, but an orchestra of perception. Each sense plays a distinct melody, sight describing light, hearing, interpreting vibration, smell and taste, decoding chemistry, touch revealing texture and temperature, yet all perform under the same conductor, the brain. Their collaboration creates a seamless and stable experience of the world. When this harmony falters, reality fragments, reminding us that perception is not just sensation but integration. In the brain, sensory cooperation begins early. Signals from different organs arrive through independent pathways, but they converge in regions that specialize in combining information. The superior colliculus, for example, merges visual and auditory data to orient gaze and attention. When you hear a sound, your eyes turn toward it almost automatically. Neurons here align spatial maps from sight and sound. Similarly, the parietal and temporal cortices fuse touch, vision, and motion into coherent spatial understanding. These interactions are so immediate that they occur before conscious awareness, demonstrating that the brain's default mode is collaboration, not isolation. This process is called multisensory integration. It ensures that perception remains efficient and reliable even when information is incomplete. If vision is unclear, the ears assist. If sound is faint, sight compensates. The phenomenon can be demonstrated through the McGurk effect, where watching a person's lips form one syllable while hearing another causes the brain to perceive a third, blended sound. The senses vote, and the majority decides. This synthesis explains how we interpret the world swiftly despite gaps or contradictions in input. The sense of balance also contributes to this cooperative network. Visual cues about the horizon combine with vestibular signals from the inner ear and proprioceptive feedback from muscles. The integration prevents falls, stabilizes posture, and maintains orientation. When one component fails, such as when the eyes report motion on a stationary screen or during turbulent travel, discomfort arises because the sensory orchestra has gone briefly out of tune. Harmony restores comfort, discord creates nausea. Emotion and memory further refine integration. The smell of sea air can conjure the sight and sound of waves even before the ocean appears. A familiar song can bring an image to mind or the feel of a specific time. These cross-sensory links depend on shared pathways in the limbic system. They reveal that perception is not fixed to one modality but braided through many, forming networks of association that define identity and meaning. The scientific explanation for this integration lies in timing. Neurons responsible for multisensory processing respond only when signals arrive within a narrow window, typically a few dozen milliseconds. This temporal coordination allows the brain to determine whether stimuli belong to the same event. When signals align, their combined response is greater than the sum of parts, an effect known as superadditivity. It enhances sensitivity and precision, making perception both faster and more accurate. The nervous system's ability to measure time at such fine resolution shows how deeply cooperation is woven into its structure. Reflectively, the harmony of the senses reveals an aesthetic principle within biology. The brain values coherence, favoring patterns that fit together smoothly. It filters out contradictions to maintain continuity. This desire for unity may underlie the human appreciation of music, art, and design, the joy of balance extended into creativity. The same neural wiring that merges sight and sound to locate a bird also merges color, texture, and form to create beauty. Perception and appreciation stem from one faculty, the ability to recognize harmony. Disruption of this balance teaches how crucial it is. Sensory deprivation or overload can fragment awareness. Prolonged isolation dulls clarity, while overstimulation produces confusion. Healthy perception requires rhythm, alternation between focus and rest, attention and release. The orchestra must sometimes pause to preserve tone. The brain achieves this through selective attention, allowing certain senses to dominate while others recede. Even silence and darkness have their place in the composition of experience. When senses blend effortlessly, consciousness feels whole. The world appears solid, continuous, and trustworthy because countless neural collaborations maintain it. Every step, every glance, every flavor depends on coordination between systems that share information faster than thought. To live inside such an intricate design is to inhabit ongoing harmony, a biological symphony performed quietly and unceasingly. Perception's beauty lies not in its parts, but in their union. Within this silent cooperation, the body finds balance, and the mind finds presence. The orchestra of senses plays without conductor or audience, creating the masterpiece each person calls reality. The human brain is built for change, not constancy. Though the world around us often remains stable, our perception continually adjusts, tuning sensitivity up or down depending on what matters most. This process, called sensory adaptation, is one of biology's quiet marvels. It allows attention to shift toward novelty while filtering away the familiar. Without it, life would be an overwhelming flood of data. With it, we can focus, learn, and rest within the stream of experience. Every sensory system adapts, each with its own rhythm. When you enter a room filled with fragrance, the scent seems strong at first, then fades as receptors in the nose become less responsive. Touch works the same way. Clothing that felt noticeable when you first put it on soon disappears from awareness. Even sight adapts. Step from bright sunlight into shade, and the world momentarily vanishes until the retina recalibrates its sensitivity to light. Adaptation is the brain's way of maintaining balance between overexposure and awareness. At the cellular level, adaptation involves both the receptor and the neuron. In smell, receptor proteins temporarily lose responsiveness when continuously activated, a process called desensitization. In vision, photoreceptor cells adjust the concentration of light-sensitive pigments, while neural circuits in the retina change their baseline firing rates. This dynamic tuning prevents saturation and conserves energy. The nervous system cannot maintain maximum responsiveness indefinitely. Constant stimulation would exhaust it. Instead, it saves attention for what changes, because change carries information. In hearing, adaptation works through temporal filtering. Continuous sound, such as the hum of an air conditioner or the rhythm of waves, fades into the background as auditory neurons reduce their firing rate. This allows the ear to detect new or unexpected sounds more easily. The same principle operates in touch, where slowly adapting receptors maintain awareness of pressure while rapidly adapting ones respond only to movement. Together, they create a layered perception that balances stability with sensitivity. The brain's higher centers also adapt. Cortical neurons recalibrate to ongoing input, shaping perception through experience. Artists who train their eyes to notice color contrasts, or musicians who distinguish minute tonal shifts, are expanding the limits of adaptation, fine-tuning responsiveness rather than reducing it. Plasticity, the brain's ability to change, means that adaptation is not just a filter but a form of learning. What the mind deems important, the senses learn to highlight. What proves irrelevant, they learn to ignore. This constant calibration extends beyond biology into emotion and thought. The phenomenon of hedonic adaptation, for instance, describes how people return to a baseline of happiness after positive or negative events. The mind, like the senses, normalizes change to maintain equilibrium. What once thrilled becomes ordinary. What once hurt becomes bearable. This psychological version of sensory adaptation shows that balance is a universal principle of life, an internal mechanism that preserves stability in a world of fluctuation. Yet adaptation carries a paradox. By filtering the familiar, it can cause us to overlook the beauty of constancy, the rhythm of breathing, the warmth of sunlight, the quiet background of safety. Familiarity can dull appreciation, making extraordinary what is merely new. Awareness then becomes a choice, to refresh perception deliberately, to notice again what the senses have dismissed. Mindful attention reawakens the sensory world, reversing adaptation through curiosity. Physiologically, adaptation is reversible. Once a stimulus disappears, sensitivity gradually returns. After removing a ring, the finger feels lighter, almost empty, as receptors regain their baseline. After leaving a noisy city for silence, faint sounds become strikingly clear. The nervous system's ability to reset preserves flexibility. It allows us to move between environments and states of focus without being trapped by the extremes of sensitivity or indifference. Reflectively, adaptation reveals the intelligence of perception. The brain's goal is not to record everything, but to construct a manageable model of reality, one that emphasizes change and ignores redundancy. In this way, adaptation teaches an unspoken lesson about attention. Awareness deepens not by constant vigilance, but by contrast. To notice the new, the mind must first allow the old to fade. This balancing act between sensitivity and stability sustains both perception and peace. It prevents overwhelm while ensuring readiness for discovery. Every adjustment, whether to light, sound, or feeling, is a reminder that perception is dynamic, not fixed. We are always recalibrating, always learning to see and hear anew. Adaptation is thus more than a physiological process. It is a philosophy embedded in tissue. It whispers that nothing remains static, that clarity depends on contrast, and that forgetting is as vital as remembering. Through the art of ignoring the obvious, the senses preserve the wonder of change itself. Every moment, the senses deliver far more information than the brain can possibly process. Light floods the eyes, vibrations fill the ears, molecules enter the nose, and countless receptors on the skin register movement, temperature, and pressure. If all of it reached awareness at once, the mind would drown in detail. Attention is the gatekeeper that prevents this flood from overwhelming consciousness. It filters the incoming stream, selecting what to emphasize and what to ignore. Through attention, the brain sculpts perception, turning raw sensation into organized experience. The biological foundation of attention lies in the brain's ability to modulate sensory input. Deep within the brainstem, the reticular formation regulates alertness and arousal. When this network is active, sensory signals pass easily to higher centers. When it quiets, the gates narrow. The thalamus serves as a relay station, deciding which messages from the senses reach the cortex. This regulation allows focus to shift smoothly between external and internal worlds. During intense concentration, certain signals are amplified. During rest, they fade to silence. Neuroscientists describe two main systems of attention: bottom-up and top-down. Bottom-up attention is automatic. It reacts to sudden changes in the environment, such as movement or sound. It is the survival reflex that turns your head toward a falling object or a flash of light. Top-down attention is voluntary and guided by intention, the ability to read a book in a noisy cafe or to listen for one voice among many. The brain balances these two modes, alternating between vigilance and choice, ensuring both safety and purpose. Attention is energy-intensive. Maintaining focus increases activity in frontal and parietal regions of the cortex and raises metabolic demand. The brain spends significant resources deciding what not to notice. To protect itself from exhaustion, it cycles between focus and rest, moments of sharp awareness followed by release. These oscillations occur even in wakefulness, producing natural waves of alertness. When attention fades, the default mode network becomes active, drifting through memory, imagination, and reflection. This shift is not failure but recovery, a way for the mind to reorganize information and restore sensitivity. Disorders of attention reveal how crucial this balance is. When filtering mechanisms falter, as in attention deficit conditions or certain types of anxiety, the world feels chaotic, every detail demanding equal importance. When they tighten too much, awareness narrows and flexibility disappears. Optimal perception depends on dynamic adjustment, openness when exploration is needed, focus when precision matters. The brain's constant negotiation between these states sustains both creativity and calm. Rest plays an essential role in this cycle. As the day quiets and the external world dims, the reticular formation lowers its activity, reducing sensory input to the cortex. The thalamus closes many of its gates, allowing only faint traces of sound or touch to pass through. The senses do not stop. They simply loosen their grip. This descent into reduced awareness is the biological prelude to sleep. The same systems that maintain attention by day now withdraw their watch, handing control to slower rhythms that support restoration. In early stages of sleep, external signals still reach the brain but are processed differently. The sensory cortex remains partially active, yet connections to regions of judgment and movement weaken. The result is a gentle uncoupling between perception and action. As sleep deepens, communication across the thalamus diminishes further, isolating consciousness from the outside world. Only stimuli of significance, your name, a sudden noise, the cry of a child, retain enough weight to break through. Attention never disappears completely. It simply changes form, becoming a sentinel rather than a spotlight. Reflectively, attention can be seen as the mind's breath, expansion to take in the world, contraction to rest within itself. Every sense participates in this rhythm. Just as eyes blink and lungs pause between inhalations, awareness alternates between perception and stillness. This rhythm allows the nervous system to remain both vigilant and peaceful, responsive yet protected from overload. If your own attention begins to drift now, that is completely fine. The body understands when to release control. The systems that once sharpened focus now soften their boundaries, letting the world blur at the edges. In this quieting, perception does not cease, it transforms. The gates of attention close gently, and the brain turns inward, continuing its silent conversation among neurons. What was once effort becomes rest, and rest becomes renewal. Attention and sleep share the same foundation, the intelligent regulation of awareness. Together they form the pulse of consciousness, alternating between presence and peace. Through their rhythm, the senses find balance, ensuring that the mind can observe, learn, and then let go. Every human being experiences the world through private perception, yet much of that perception is shared. We not only see and hear but also feel what others feel. A grimace of pain can cause us to flinch. A smile can lift our own mood. A tone of voice can tighten the chest or relax it. This remarkable ability to sense another's inner state arises from an intimate connection between perception and emotion, a neural bridge that transforms individual experience into empathy. The roots of this bridge lie in the brain's mirror system, discovered when neuroscientists observed that certain neurons fired not only when a monkey performed an action but also when it watched another perform the same action. Later research confirmed similar systems in humans. Mirror neurons in the premotor and parietal cortices activate both during execution and observation of movement. When you see someone grasp a cup, your own motor areas rehearse the gesture silently. When you see someone in pain, regions that process your own discomfort, such as the anterior insular and anterior cingulate cortex, light up as if sharing the sensation. This simulation forms the biological basis of empathy. To perceive is to participate. The senses supply the data that make this possible. Vision reads facial expression, hearing detects tone and rhythm of speech, touch conveys warmth or withdrawal. Each channel provides cues that the brain translates into emotional meaning. These sensory signals converge in the limbic system, where they mingle with stored memories of similar experiences. The result is an internal echo of another person's state, a translation of perception into emotion. Empathy is therefore not imagination but perception extended inward. Chemical messengers reinforce this process. When we witness kindness or affection, the brain releases oxytocin, the same hormone that strengthens social bonds through touch and trust. Conversely, witnessing distress can elevate cortisol, the stress hormone, prompting concern or protective behavior. These physiological reactions evolved to maintain social cohesion in groups. By sensing and sharing the feelings of others, humans developed cooperation, caregiving, and culture itself. The senses thus became instruments not only of survival but of morality. Even subtle sensory cues can shape social emotion. The direction of gaze, the pitch of voice, or the rhythm of footsteps can signal approach or avoidance. We read these patterns instinctively. A sudden stillness alerts us to danger before logic explains it. A synchronized movement, as in walking beside someone or dancing in time, fosters connection by aligning perception across bodies. Studies using brain imaging show that when two people interact harmoniously, their neural activity begins to synchronize. The rhythm of one mind mirrors the rhythm of another, forming a temporary shared state of consciousness. Empathy also depends on touch. Physical contact, holding a hand, offering a gentle pat, transmits reassurance faster than words. Research demonstrates that people can identify emotions such as love, gratitude, or sympathy through touch alone. Pressure, duration, and temperature become emotional vocabulary. The same receptors that warn of harm also convey care, proving that touch's meaning depends on context rather than stimulus. A strong grip can threaten or protect, a soft one can comfort or deceive. The brain interprets intent through association, blending physical and emotional data into unified perception. Yet empathy has boundaries. Constant exposure to others' emotions can lead to fatigue or confusion of identity. The brain must distinguish between self and other, even while sharing feelings. Structures such as the prefrontal cortex maintain this separation, regulating the mirror response so that compassion remains balanced rather than overwhelming. Healthy empathy involves resonance without absorption, feeling with rather than feeling as. This control allows social sensitivity without paralysis. Culture and upbringing modulate empathy too. Expressions of emotion differ across societies, and the brain learns which cues carry meaning. Eye contact that conveys sincerity in one culture may signal disrespect in another. Despite such variation, the underlying neural circuits are universal, suggesting that empathy is a biological constant shaped by learning. It grows through experience, widening as understanding deepens. Reflectively, shared perception reveals that the boundary between self and world is permeable. Through the senses, we inhabit not only our own perspective but fragments of others. A glance, a sound, or a touch transmits entire stories across space. Empathy turns sensation into understanding, connecting individuals through invisible threads of awareness. It reminds us that perception is not solitary but communal, that to sense the world fully is also to sense the lives within it. Every feeling we recognize in others expands our own capacity for perception. The nervous system, tuned by evolution for survival, becomes an instrument for compassion. Through the same mechanisms that detect danger, we detect kindness. The body that once shielded itself from harm now reaches outward in understanding. In this shared sensing lies the essence of human connection, the ability to know another life through the simple act of perceiving. For most people, the senses maintain a steady balance. Light, sound, and texture arrive in manageable amounts, allowing perception to feel natural and continuous. Yet for some, this balance tilts toward extremes. The world may arrive too loudly, too brightly, too sharply, or not enough. These differences reveal how delicate the sensory system is, and how small variations in neural processing can change the very texture of experience. The human nervous system constantly regulates the strength of its signals. At every synapse, inhibitory neurons dampen excess activity, while excitatory ones amplify it. When this equilibrium shifts, sensory experience can either overflow or fade. In conditions such as hypersensitivity, ordinary stimuli, fluorescent lights, overlapping voices, the touch of fabric can feel unbearable. In hyposensitivity, the same stimuli barely register, leaving the world distant or muted. These opposing patterns occur across many contexts: autism spectrum conditions, migraine, sensory processing disorders, and even temporary states brought on by stress or fatigue. In hypersensitivity, the brain's filters let too much information through. Studies show overactivation in sensory cortices and reduced inhibition by neurotransmitters such as GABA, which normally quiets excessive firing. The result is a sensory landscape rich in detail but exhausting to inhabit. The rustle of paper may sound like thunder. A crowded room may shimmer with motion and color to the point of pain. The individual perceives with unusual acuity, but at the cost of comfort. Everyday life demands constant self-regulation, seeking calm spaces, dimmer light, softer fabrics, to restore equilibrium. Hyposensitivity reflects the opposite imbalance. The brain's sensory pathways fail to respond fully, often due to reduced receptor density or slower signal transmission. This under-responsiveness can make touch seem distant, flavor bland, or sound flat. People who experience it may seek stronger stimuli, turning music louder, preferring spicy food, or moving constantly to awaken the senses. In some neurological conditions, hyposensitivity contributes to difficulties with coordination and attention, because sensory feedback lacks precision. Between these extremes lie unique variations such as synesthesia, where stimulation of one sense triggers another. A person might see colors when hearing music, taste shapes, or associate numbers with textures. Brain imaging reveals cross-activation between normally distinct sensory regions, suggesting that the boundaries between them are thinner. For synesthetes, the world is a multi-layered canvas, its elements intertwined in ways that defy ordinary perception. What seems strange from the outside feels natural within, a reminder that there is no single correct way to sense. Temporary distortions of sensory balance occur even in typical brains. After spending time in bright sunlight, a dim room feels dark until the eyes adapt. Loud concerts leave an echoing quiet in the ears as auditory receptors recover. Extreme stress heightens perception, sharpening the senses for survival, while deep relaxation softens them. Chemicals, too, can alter thresholds. Caffeine sharpens alertness, alcohol dulls touch and sound. These shifts show how perception is not fixed but continually adjusted by the body's chemistry and state of mind. Neuroscience now recognizes that emotional regulation and sensory regulation are deeply connected. The same networks that filter external stimuli also manage internal feelings. Overstimulation can lead to anxiety, while sensory deprivation may contribute to apathy or depression. Environments designed with this knowledge, balanced lighting, natural soundscapes, gentle textures, can restore harmony between mind and body. Therapeutic practices such as sensory integration therapy aim to rebuild tolerance by gradually training the nervous system to process input more evenly. Reflectively, these differences in sensitivity expand our understanding of what it means to be human. To feel too much is to live in vivid intensity. To feel too little is to drift in quiet detachment. Both reveal the range of perception, the spectrum of ways the brain can translate the world. Sensory diversity, rather than flaw, is variation within the human design. It enriches art, science, and empathy, offering new windows into experience. The senses, like instruments, require tuning. Some are set to high volume, some to soft resonance. Neither setting is wrong. Both express the nervous system's flexibility. Through adaptation, individuals learn to find rhythm within their unique range of sensitivity. The challenge is not to normalize but to harmonize, to bring awareness, environment, and biology into gentle accord. When the world feels too much or too little, perception itself becomes teacher. It shows how awareness depends on balance, how the line between comfort and chaos is drawn by the quiet work of neurons. To sense differently is simply to sense deeply, and to navigate those differences is to discover that perception, in all its forms, is the foundation of individuality. For most of human history, the limits of perception defined the limits of knowledge. The eye could only see what light revealed, the ear only what air could carry, the skin only what it could touch. Yet from the moment humans shaped their first tools, the boundaries of the senses began to stretch. A stick extended the reach of touch, a torch brightened the night, and every innovation since has been an attempt to perceive more, to turn invisible forces into visible patterns and faint vibrations into sound. The telescope was one of the earliest great extensions of vision. When Galileo turned his toward the night sky in the 17th century, he discovered that Jupiter had moons, and that the Milky Way was not a mist, but a field of countless stars. The telescope amplified human sight by collecting more light than the eye could gather, focusing distant photons onto the retina. Its invention marked the beginning of sensory augmentation through technology, transforming not only what could be seen but what could be imagined. Microscopes followed the same principle in the opposite direction, revealing life's small architectures. Cells, bacteria, and crystalline structures came into view, reshaping medicine and biology. The microscope expanded the scale of touch and sight, allowing the invisible textures of matter to be explored through glass and light. Each improvement in optics deepened the human capacity to observe, until the electron microscope finally revealed the contours of molecules themselves. These instruments taught that reality extends far beyond the limits of unaided perception. Hearing, too, has grown beyond its natural range. Microphones and amplifiers allow whispers to be heard across continents, while ultrasound devices translate vibrations beyond human frequency into useful data. In medicine, ultrasonic waves help visualize internal organs. In navigation, Sonar maps the depths of oceans. Radio telescopes detect waves from stars so distant that their light has not yet reached visible wavelengths. Through such tools, humanity listens to both the smallest heartbeat and the oldest echo of the universe. Modern sensors now extend every sense at once. Infrared cameras detect heat, converting invisible radiation into color. Spectrometers analyze the chemical composition of distant planets through their light signatures. Seismographs feel the tremors of the Earth more sensitively than any foot could. Satellites watch weather systems from orbit, while neural implants restore sight and hearing to those who have lost them. The line between biology and technology blurs as prosthetics merge with the nervous system, giving mechanical limbs sensation and control through electrodes that communicate directly with the brain. At the neural level, these innovations exploit the brain's plasticity, its ability to reinterpret input from new sources. Experiments have given subjects tactile vests that translate sound into vibration, allowing the deaf to perceive through touch. Others use magnetic sensors attached to the skin, training participants to sense orientation relative to the Earth's magnetic field. Within weeks, the brain integrates these artificial signals as naturally as sight or hearing. This adaptability suggests that perception is not fixed by biology, but by experience. The brain, in essence, is a flexible receiver waiting for new channels. Digital technology has created a vast collective extension of perception. Networks of sensors monitor air quality, temperature, radiation, and movement across the planet, transmitting data to screens accessible from anywhere. Through them, individuals can perceive environmental changes in distant places, almost as directly as they sense their own surroundings. Humanity has built an external nervous system, distributed, shared, and constantly awake, turning information into a global form of awareness. Yet, extension brings responsibility. As technology amplifies the senses, it can also overwhelm them. The same devices that let us see and hear more can fill life with constant noise and glare. The nervous system, evolved for scarcity of input, now navigates abundance. To extend perception wisely means not only to enhance detection but also to preserve clarity. The future of sensory evolution may depend as much on selective silence as on expansion. Reflectively, the marriage of sense and technology reveals a deep continuity between biology and invention. Both arise from the same impulse, to know. The telescope and the microscope, the camera and the microphone, all serve the same purpose as the eye, ear, and skin, to connect the mind with the world. Each tool is an externalized sense, built from curiosity and guided by imagination. The story of technology is therefore not separate from the story of perception. Every device is a mirror of the nervous system, extending its reach into space, time, and scale. Through tools, humanity has multiplied its senses, but the essence of perception remains unchanged, to translate energy into meaning. As machines grow more precise, they remind us of the fragile, adaptable instrument within, the human body itself, whose awareness still begins with a breath, a spark of light, or a vibration in the air. The evolution of the senses is no longer guided solely by biology. For the first time in history, humanity has begun to design perception itself. Where once natural selection shaped what could be seen or heard, now technology extends, replaces, and even invents new ways of sensing reality. Artificial perception, created through machines, algorithms, and neural interfaces, marks the next stage in the story of awareness. It raises a profound question. What happens when the tools that expand our senses begin to sense for themselves? The foundation of artificial sensing lies in sensors and data interpretation. Cameras mimic the eye, microphones the ear, accelerometers the inner ear, and chemical detectors the nose and tongue. Each captures a specific kind of signal and converts it into digital form, but the key difference between human and machine sensing lies in scale and scope. Machines can detect wavelengths of light invisible to humans, frequencies too low or too high to hear, and fields of radiation our bodies cannot feel. Through technology, perception now extends into realms that were once theoretical: the ultraviolet, the subatomic, the gravitational. Artificial intelligence has given these sensors a form of awareness, albeit statistical rather than conscious. Neural networks process streams of sensory data, identifying patterns faster than any human could. In medicine, algorithms analyze scans to find faint traces of disease invisible to the eye. Satellites, equipped with multispectral vision monitor deforestation and ocean temperature, detecting subtle changes that predict climate shifts. Robots use arrays of tactile sensors to navigate space by touch, and drones perceive through infrared eyes that pierce the darkness. Each system transforms raw input into action, echoing the same cycle of detection, integration, and response that defines biological senses. The most intimate frontier lies in neurotechnology, the direct interface between machines and the brain. Researchers have already restored partial sight through implants that stimulate the visual cortex, allowing blind individuals to perceive outlines and movement. Cochlear implants convert sound into electrical signals that the auditory nerve can interpret as hearing. More experimental devices aim to create entirely new senses: magnetic field awareness, ultraviolet perception, even direct internet connectivity. The brain, with its adaptable wiring, accepts these inputs as though they were natural. Once trained, it cannot distinguish between signals born of the body and those born of silicon. This merging of organic and artificial perception introduces ethical and philosophical challenges. If technology can broaden awareness, it can also narrow it through dependence. Over-reliance on machines may dull natural sensitivity, while the manipulation of sensory input through virtual environments or targeted advertising can alter perception in ways that bypass conscious control. The same systems that reveal truth can also distort it. The responsibility for maintaining clarity of perception, once biological, is now moral and societal. In the realm of art and creativity, artificial senses have become partners rather than tools. Generative systems compose music beyond human hearing range, or visualize data as intricate patterns of color and motion. Artists use brain-computer interfaces to turn emotion directly into sound or light, blending internal and external realities. These collaborations expand what perception means, not only the ability to sense, but the ability to express sensing itself. Philosophers and neuroscientists now speak of an approaching sensory singularity, a point at which the integration of artificial systems may give rise to entirely new modes of awareness. Machines already process far more data than any human could experience. When connected networks share and interpret sensory input globally, perception becomes collective, distributed, and nearly instantaneous. It resembles a planetary nervous system in which satellites, sensors, and algorithms form a shared organ of sight and hearing for civilization. In this view, humanity is not merely extending its senses but transforming into something new, a hybrid organism of flesh and data. Reflectively, the development of artificial senses mirrors evolution's central principle: adaptation to environment. Just as early organisms evolved eyes to detect light, we now build machines to detect information invisible to us. The continuity between nerve and circuit suggests that perception itself is a universal process, the conversion of energy into meaning, regardless of medium. Whether in neurons or transistors, the goal remains the same: to understand. The future of perception will likely blur the distinction between natural and artificial, inner and outer, human and machine. The senses that began as biological survival tools have become instruments of exploration, imagination, and creation. As artificial perception grows, it challenges us to remain conscious not only of what we can sense, but of how we sense. Awareness must evolve alongside technology, preserving empathy, wonder, and restraint amid limitless possibility. Perception, whether organic or synthetic, will always be the bridge between existence and understanding. To expand it is to enlarge the boundary of what life can experience. The senses we design may soon outnumber those we were born with, yet the purpose remains unchanged: to connect mind and universe through the endless act of noticing. Every moment you are awake, the brain generates a world. The colors, sounds, textures, and spaces that seem to exist outside are actually constructed within. This realization can feel unsettling, but it is one of neuroscience's most profound discoveries. Perception is not a mirror of reality, but a model built from limited data. The senses provide fragments. The brain assembles them into coherence. What we call the external world is a continuous act of prediction, correction, and belief. The evidence for this lies in how the brain processes sensory input. Each sense delivers signals that are incomplete and delayed. Light takes time to reach the eye, sound moves slower through air, and neural impulses travel at finite speed. Yet we experience the world as immediate and seamless. The brain achieves this illusion by predicting what should happen next and updating the prediction as new data arrives. It does not wait for perfection. It anticipates, fills in, and smooths over. This predictive mechanism is efficient but also vulnerable to error. When predictions fail, illusions appear. Vision offers countless examples. The blind spot in each eye, where the optic nerve exits the retina, contains no photoreceptors, yet you never see a hole in your vision. The brain fills it automatically using surrounding information. The same happens when you blink. The brief darkness disappears from awareness. Even color is inferred rather than measured. The brain compares wavelengths across areas of the retina and assigns hues to maintain consistency, adjusting for changes in light. You see not what is, but what should be true given context. Auditory perception functions in a similar way. The brain anticipates the rhythm of speech and music, predicting the next note or syllable. This expectation allows comprehension even when sounds are masked or distorted. Experiments show that when a brief section of speech is replaced with noise, the mind still hears the missing word, a phenomenon called phonemic restoration. Sound, like sight, is a construction built from expectation and correction. At a deeper level, the entire sense of body and space is an illusion maintained by feedback loops. Proprioception, balance, and vision merge to create a stable self positioned in the environment. When these inputs conflict, as in virtual reality or microgravity, the illusion falters. The brain can be convinced that a fake limb belongs to the body or that motion exists while standing still. These effects are not failures of perception but demonstrations of how perception works. It chooses coherence over accuracy. The predictive brain operates through a hierarchy of models. Lower regions handle basic patterns such as edges or tones. Higher ones integrate meaning, memory, and expectation. Each level sends predictions downward and receives error signals upward. When prediction matches input, perception feels clear and stable. When mismatch occurs, the brain updates its model, revising belief. This process, known as predictive coding, underlies both perception and learning. Reality, in this view, is the brain's best guess at what the senses imply. This constructive nature of perception explains why hallucinations, dreams, and imagination share neural pathways with ordinary seeing and hearing. The same networks that interpret sensory data can generate it internally. When deprived of external input, the brain continues to predict, producing imagery and sound from within. Even waking life contains elements of this inward generation. Faces recognized in clouds, voices heard in noise, patterns found where none exist. The brain prefers meaning to emptiness. Reflectively, this realization shifts the definition of reality itself. If perception is an internal model, then the world we inhabit is partly shaped by our own expectations. Culture, language, and memory influence what we notice and how we interpret it. Two people can experience the same event yet describe it differently because their internal predictions differ. The senses gather information, but belief filters it. Far from diminishing experience, this constructiveness reveals its wonder. The brain's illusions are not mistakes, they are the creative foundation of consciousness. By transforming scattered signals into order, the mind turns physics into beauty, vibration into music, and reflection into color. Reality emerges not as a fixed image but as a living dialogue between world and mind. To perceive, then, is to dream with guidance, to project meaning onto the physical and correct it through contact. The world we share exists in this collaboration between sensation and imagination. Each sense contributes its notes, and the brain composes them into the symphony of awareness. What we call reality is simply the most harmonious version of truth that the senses and the mind can agree upon. When the body drifts into sleep, the senses do not simply switch off, they change their rhythm. The eyes close, the ears quiet, the skin cools, and the muscles soften, yet the brain continues to listen to the faint signals of the world. Sleep is not the absence of sensation, but its reorganization. It is the period when perception turns inward, when the external world fades and the inner world takes its place. The descent into sleep begins with a gradual withdrawal of attention. As the thalamus closes many of its sensory gates, fewer signals reach the cortex. Vision, which dominates waking life, dims first. Touch and hearing linger longer. Even as consciousness ebbs, the auditory system remains partially alert, ready to detect danger. This selective sensitivity ensures safety. Important sounds such as a crying child or the call of one's name can still awaken the sleeper. Other noises, irrelevant and repetitive, lose their power to disturb. During light sleep, the senses float between wakefulness and rest. The body still registers temperature and movement, but the mind begins to interpret these inputs in dreamlike ways. A passing sound might become part of a dream's storyline, woven seamlessly into the brain's internal narrative. As sleep deepens, the senses retreat further from the external world. The muscles relax under the influence of neurotransmitters such as GABA and glycine, which suppress motor activity. The eyes move only in brief, rapid bursts that mark the dream stage, while the rest of the body remains still. Dreaming represents the brain's own form of sensory simulation. In the absence of external input, the cortex generates its own imagery, sound, and motion. Studies using electroencephalography and brain imaging show that many of the same regions active during perception are active again in dreams. The visual cortex paints landscapes. The auditory cortex conjures voices. The limbic system fills them with emotion. The brain becomes both artist and observer, turning stored memories and fragments of imagination into an inner world that feels tangible. Scientists believe that these nightly simulations serve vital functions. They help consolidate memory by replaying experiences and integrating them into long-term storage. They also regulate emotion, allowing the mind to rehearse and resolve conflicts. Dreams, though fantastical, use the same sensory architecture as waking life, ensuring that perception remains flexible and responsive. The senses, far from resting, are refining themselves for the next day's reality. Sleep also restores the physical organs of perception. The photoreceptors in the retina recover from light exposure. The auditory system recalibrates sensitivity. The skin and muscles repair from the constant feedback of movement. Hormonal rhythms synchronize these processes. Melatonin signals darkness and rest, while growth hormone and other repair agents peak during deep sleep. The nightly cycle thus serves both the mind and the senses, renewing their precision for morning. From an evolutionary standpoint, sleep likely developed as a balance between vulnerability and maintenance. While consciousness rests, the brain performs housekeeping tasks, removing waste through the glymphatic system and strengthening neural connections. In sensory regions, synapses are selectively pruned, preserving important pathways and trimming redundancy. This fine-tuning keeps perception efficient, preventing overstimulation and sharpening awareness upon waking. Each morning, the senses emerge slightly reorganized, freshly tuned to interpret the world again. Reflectively, sleep can be viewed as the mind's night shift, the hidden half of perception's work. By day, the senses gather. By night, they restore. The alternating cycle between input and integration sustains balance. The silence of sleep is not emptiness but quiet construction, a time when the world within continues to sense itself. If your eyes grow heavy as you listen, that is completely fine. Sleep is the natural continuation of the story your senses began. They have guided you through the brightness and noise of day. Now they guide you inward, towards stillness. The sounds soften, the light fades behind closed lids, and the rhythm of breath becomes the last bridge between awareness and rest. In that slowing, perception transforms again, no longer reaching outward, but inward, to dream. Even as you drift, the senses keep gentle watch. The heart still feels its own beat. The skin still knows the air. Through their quiet labor, they carry you safely through the night, preparing the mind for another day of seeing, hearing, tasting, touching, and knowing the world anew. Every language on earth begins with the senses. Words like bright, cold, rough, and sweet are not abstract inventions, they are translations of sensory experience into sound. Human thought itself evolved from these physical encounters with the world. The brain learned to name, compare, and remember sensations long before it learned to reason. Even now, our most complex ideas are rooted in the body's contact with reality. We do not simply think about the world, we think through it. Cognitive science shows that perception and language are deeply intertwined. The regions of the brain that process sensory information overlap with those involved in understanding words. When you read the word cinnamon, neurons in the olfactory cortex may activate faintly, recalling the scent. When you hear kick, motor regions controlling the leg light up. This phenomenon, called embodied cognition, demonstrates that language does not merely describe sensory experience, it recreates it internally. Meaning is grounded in simulation. Children's first words follow the order of their sensory discoveries. They name what they can see, touch, or taste, and gradually abstract these experiences into categories. Through language, the senses become shareable. You cannot feel another's texture or smell what they smell, but you can imagine it when they describe it. Words act as sensory bridges, allowing one nervous system to evoke sensations in another. Communication in this sense is a collective act of perception. Metaphor extends this principle. Many abstract concepts are built from sensory roots. We speak of warm feelings, sharp minds, bright ideas, and heavy hearts. These expressions are not coincidences. They reveal how the brain organizes understanding through the same neural circuits that process touch, temperature, and weight. Abstract reasoning depends on sensory scaffolding. To grasp the invisible, the mind borrows from the tangible. The senses also shape grammar and structure. Some languages prioritize spatial relationships, reflecting the dominance of vision and movement. Others are organized around sound and rhythm, echoing the ear's sensitivity to pattern. The diversity of linguistic systems shows how culture magnifies different senses. A community of navigators may develop hundreds of words for direction. A society centered on food will refine its vocabulary of flavor. In each case, language mirrors the sensory priorities of life. Memory, too, is encoded through sensory cues. The smell of a familiar place, the sound of a certain tone, or the feel of an object can trigger whole narratives. Language captures these triggers and makes them retrievable through speech. To tell a story is to reawaken perception in another's mind. The more vivid the sensory detail, the stronger the memory it evokes. This is why poetry and music, with their rhythmic and sensory richness, reach deeper than plain facts. They engage the same neural pathways that perception does. In science and philosophy, the senses have always defined the limits of understanding. Ancient thinkers debated whether knowledge begins in perception or reason. Modern neuroscience leans toward the former. Without sensory input, there is no structure upon which reason can build. The blind brain, deprived of vision, rewires itself for touch and hearing, proving that perception forms the foundation of cognition. To think is to organize sensory experience into patterns of prediction and meaning. Reflectively, language may be seen as humanity's sixth sense, a collective organ that extends perception beyond individual limits. Through it, one person's experience becomes accessible to another's mind. Words carry echoes of sensation across time and distance, allowing knowledge to accumulate. The great libraries and archives of the world are, in a sense, extensions of touch and sight, fossilized sensations preserved as symbols. Understanding that thought grows from sensation restores humility to reason. The mind's loftiest abstractions, justice, beauty, truth, are rooted in feeling. We know fairness because we have felt balance, beauty because we have seen harmony, truth because we have sensed alignment between expectation and reality. The body is not separate from the intellect, it is the soil from which intellect grows. Language allows us to name the unseen, but the unseen always traces back to the felt. To think clearly, then, is to stay close to the senses, to remember that every idea began as color, sound, warmth, or taste. The words we use are echoes of experience, and every sentence is, in its way, a reconstruction of the world we once touched. The senses gave us language, and through language, they continue to shape how we understand everything around us. Each moment leaves an imprint on the senses before it reaches thought. The faint glow of light that lingers after closing your eyes, the echo of a word just spoken, the warmth that remains after touch. These traces are the beginnings of memory. They are fleeting, measured in seconds, yet they allow the world to feel continuous rather than fragmented. This first stage of remembrance is called sensory memory, the bridge between raw sensation and conscious experience. Sensory memory exists in every system of perception. The visual form, known as iconic memory, lasts less than half a second but preserves enough detail to link one image to the next. Without it, the world would flicker like a broken film reel. Auditory memory, or echoic memory, endures for several seconds, holding sounds long enough for the brain to interpret speech and melody. Touch, smell, and taste have their own micro-hold of time, brief but essential. The nervous system depends on these delays to process meaning. Perception, in truth, is built on remembering what has just happened. Once information crosses this threshold, it enters short-term or working memory, where attention selects what to keep. The senses compete for this limited stage. Only what aligns with emotion, relevance, or repetition survives the transition. The rest fades into the quiet hum of the unnoticed. Yet even forgotten sensations shape behavior indirectly, guiding reflexes and expectations. The body remembers patterns the mind never names. In the brain, sensory memory relies on rapid electrical reverberation within neural circuits. Visual impressions persist in the occipital cortex, auditory ones in the superior temporal gyrus. These circuits continue to fire briefly after the stimulus ends, maintaining a fading echo of the original signal. The hippocampus, central to long-term storage, does not yet participate. At this level, memory is not narrative but sensation, a trace without story. Still, these short echoes influence perception deeply. They allow the brain to integrate movement and continuity. When you watch a moving object, the image on the retina jumps from one position to the next, yet motion appears smooth because iconic memory stitches the fragments together. When you hear a melody, echoic memory holds the previous note long enough for rhythm and harmony to emerge. Without these invisible threads, perception would collapse into disconnected flashes. Memory, even in its briefest form, is what gives time its flow. Over the course of a day, the accumulation of sensory traces shapes mood and awareness. Constant stimulation can saturate memory buffers, leading to fatigue or distraction. The mind becomes crowded, unable to filter new input. Periods of quiet and stillness restore balance by allowing neural activity to settle. During rest, and especially in sleep, these traces are either erased or consolidated. The brain decides which impressions to keep and which to release, clearing the field for the next day's experiences. As the body slows and sleep approaches, the boundary between perception and memory softens. The senses withdraw from the external world, and their last impressions dissolve into imagination. The sound of distant traffic may blur into the rhythm of breath. The afterimage of light behind closed eyes becomes the first color of a dream. This transition from sensory memory to dream imagery is seamless. It is the mind's way of continuing perception inward, letting the day transform into a landscape of memory and emotion. If you find yourself drifting now, that is completely fine. The senses know how to rest, even when awareness lingers. Each breath carries away the day's fragments, the sights, the sounds, the countless touches that filled your waking hours. They fade gently, leaving behind a clear and quiet mind. The neural circuits that once hummed with activity slow to a peaceful rhythm, preparing for sleep's deeper consolidation. Sleep completes the work that sensory memory begins. It replays patterns, strengthens connections, and releases what no longer matters. The quiet of the mind is not emptiness but renewal, the natural pause that lets perception begin again. In that stillness, the senses find their balance between remembering and letting go. The day's impressions sink softly into the background, and the night accepts them, transforming noise into calm continuity. Through rest, the senses learn again how to see, hear, and feel the world with clarity when the morning light returns. Long before eyes opened or ears formed, the first living cells were already sensing their surroundings. They had no nerves, no brain, no organs of perception, only thin membranes that felt gradients of light, temperature, or chemical concentration. Yet within those primitive reactions lay the origin of awareness, the ability to detect difference, to know where nutrients were richer or where danger approached, was the first step toward perception. Life began as a sensitivity to change. Early single-celled organisms relied on molecules embedded in their membranes to read the environment. These molecular sensors detected variations in acidity, salinity, or light, and triggered movement toward or away from stimuli. Bacteria, for example, still use chemoreceptors to follow chemical trails, moving toward food and away from toxins. This basic responsiveness forms the template for every sense that followed. Evolution built complexity by layering structure on top of this simple principle: detect, interpret, and respond. As life diversified, cells began to specialize. Clusters of sensory cells formed in multicellular organisms, each tuned to particular types of energy: mechanical, chemical, or electromagnetic. The first eyes were not eyes at all, but patches of light-sensitive pigment that helped creatures orient toward brightness. Over millions of years, these patches deepened into cups, then into chambers with lenses. The process was gradual but relentless. Each adaptation added more precision, transforming vague awareness into focused sight. Vision, one of the most intricate of all senses, began as little more than the ability to tell light from dark. Hearing followed a different path. In early aquatic animals, hair-like cells detected vibration in surrounding water. These mechanoreceptors, precursors to the modern cochlea, allowed detection of predators or prey. As creatures moved onto land, air replaced water as the medium of sound, and the structures evolved to capture and amplify vibration more efficiently. Bones in the skull became levers for pressure waves, eventually forming the delicate chain of the middle ear. From these small adjustments arose the complex symphony of terrestrial hearing. Smell and taste, by contrast, trace back to the earliest chemical senses. Even the simplest organisms needed to identify molecules that signaled nourishment or danger. In vertebrates, these senses separated into distinct organs, with olfactory neurons sampling the air and taste receptors sampling dissolved substances. Though often underestimated, these chemical senses are evolutionarily ancient and intimately tied to memory and emotion, guiding survival long before reason existed. Touch and proprioception emerged as organisms developed movement. Skin-like tissues evolved to detect pressure and temperature, while internal receptors in muscles and joints monitored posture. These senses formed the foundation for navigation and coordination, giving animals a sense of body and space. They also gave rise to social behavior. Physical contact became communication, bonding, and comfort. Through touch, life discovered connection beyond individual boundaries. Across species, evolution did not create new senses from nothing. It refined existing systems to capture new forms of energy. Some animals perceive ultraviolet or infrared light. Others detect electric or magnetic fields. Sharks use electroreceptors to sense the bioelectric signals of prey. Migratory birds navigate using the Earth's magnetic field, possibly through specialized molecules in their eyes. Each adaptation represents nature's endless experimentation with ways of knowing. In humans, evolution reached a new layer: self-awareness. The sensory systems that once guided survival began to guide reflection. The brain no longer merely registered stimuli, it questioned them. Perception turned into curiosity, and curiosity into consciousness. The senses became windows not only to the world but to the self, allowing humans to contemplate their own experience. This capacity for introspection, built from the same neural circuits that detect light and sound, transformed sensing into thinking. Reflectively, the story of sensory evolution is also the story of life's awakening. From the faint chemical gradients felt by ancient microbes to the complex symphonies interpreted by human minds, perception has always been life's way of reaching outward. Every eye, ear, and nerve is a continuation of that first cell's instinct to notice difference. Awareness deepened with complexity until the universe, through living beings, could observe itself. The senses remind us that consciousness is not a separate miracle but an extension of the oldest biological truth. To live is to sense. Each adaptation, each organ, each neural pattern is a refinement of that primal act. Through billions of years, sensitivity evolved into perception, perception into imagination, and imagination into understanding. The world did not invent the senses invented the world, translating energy into experience and experience into meaning. In that lineage of perception, every moment of awareness is a continuation of the oldest dialogue between life and its surroundings, the dialogue that made consciousness possible. Every sense that connects us to the world also reveals how easily that connection can be broken. Vision dims with age or injury, hearing fades in noise or time, taste and smell vanish after illness, touch dulls or distorts in disease. The senses are delicate instruments, dependent on fragile cells and precise chemistry, yet their very vulnerability highlights an opposing truth: perception endures. Even when one channel falters, the others rise to fill its absence. The sensory system is both frail and remarkably adaptable, capable of rebuilding awareness from fragments. The fragility of the senses begins at the cellular level. In the eye, photoreceptor cells are among the most metabolically active in the body, constantly regenerating pigments and membranes to capture light. Because they cannot divide, once destroyed by injury or degeneration, they do not replace themselves. The hair cells of the inner ear share this fate. A single loud concert can permanently damage thousands of them, leading to irreversible hearing loss. Similarly, olfactory neurons, though they can regenerate, are easily impaired by infection or pollutants. Touch receptors in the skin lose density over time, and the sensitivity of taste buds diminishes with age. These are biological reminders that the senses, while ancient, remain mortal. Yet the brain's ability to adapt often compensates for what the body loses. When one sense declines, others strengthen through neuroplasticity. In individuals who lose sight, auditory and tactile regions expand, allowing enhanced hearing and touch. Those who lose hearing often develop superior visual attention and sensitivity to movement. The sensory cortex reorganizes itself, assigning unused neural territory to the senses that remain. This flexibility shows that perception is not confined to organs, but distributed across the brain's entire architecture. Prosthetics and neurotechnology now extend this adaptability further. Cochlear implants translate sound into electrical impulses that the auditory nerve can interpret. Retinal implants stimulate light patterns directly onto the visual cortex. Even artificial limbs fitted with sensory feedback systems allow users to feel through pressure sensors. These technologies work because the brain does not demand authenticity, it demands coherence. If signals arrive in recognizable patterns, the brain will learn to interpret them as sensation. In this way, the line between restoration and invention grows increasingly thin. The senses also demonstrate resilience in healing. After temporary loss, such as anosmia from a cold or nerve damage from injury, recovery often occurs through regeneration and retraining. Smell therapy, repeated exposure to familiar scents, can rebuild olfactory pathways. Balance can return after vestibular damage, as the brain learns to rely more on vision and proprioception. This adaptability underscores a deeper biological principle. Perception seeks equilibrium. The body and brain continuously recalibrate to maintain coherent awareness, even under constraint. However, fragility also carries psychological weight. losing a sense changes identity. People who lose vision or hearing describe not only practical challenges but shifts in how they feel the world, changes in confidence, emotion, and memory. Each sense contributes to self-awareness, and its absence redefines the boundaries of experience. Yet through adaptation, many rediscover richness in the remaining senses. The blind musician hears detail invisible to others. The deaf painter feels rhythm in light. These examples remind us that limitation often unveils new forms of perception rather than ending it. Environmental damage poses another threat. Noise pollution dulls hearing. Light pollution erases the subtlety of night vision. Air pollutants blunt smell and taste. Modern life, rich in artificial stimulation, can degrade natural sensitivity. Protecting the senses, therefore, becomes a form of ecological care, not only for health but for the integrity of perception itself. The more noise we create, the less we hear. The more glare we produce, the less we see. Conservation of environment and conservation of perception are intertwined. Reflectively, the fragility of the senses deepens appreciation for their resilience. Every sound heard and color seen depends on a chain of fragile events. Photons striking the retina, molecules binding to receptors, vibrations bending microscopic hairs. That this process works at all is extraordinary. That it persists through injury, age, and adaptation is a testament to life's determination to connect. The senses endure not through perfection but through repair. To sense is to risk loss, yet the capacity to rebuild makes perception endlessly renewable. Even in darkness, the mind creates light. Even in silence, it finds rhythm. The fragility of the senses reveals the miracle of their persistence, the ongoing effort of the body and brain to translate the world, again and again, despite time, damage, and change. In that endurance lies the quiet strength of perception, fragile in structure, but unbreakable in purpose. Every sense tells a different story, yet all those stories merge into a single experience. The eyes report color and form, the ears carry rhythm and tone, the skin feels pressure and temperature, the tongue and nose reveal chemistry, but we never perceive them separately. We live inside their harmony. The unity of perception, the seamless blending of all sensory streams, is one of consciousness's greatest achievements. It creates the illusion that there is one world out there, though in truth it is composed of many overlapping signals woven together by the mind. The brain's task of integration begins in the thalamus, where nearly all sensory pathways converge. From there, information spreads across networks of cortical areas that interact constantly. Vision contributes spatial layout, hearing adds timing and distance, and touch grounds the self in space. These modalities operate in parallel but remain synchronized through neural oscillations, rhythmic patterns that align timing across brain regions. The synchronization allows sight, sound, and movement to fuse into coherent events. You see a hand clap and hear its sound as one action, even though the signals reach your brain at different times. The brain corrects the delay and edits the moment into unity. This editing extends to emotion and memory. The limbic system, which colors experience with feeling, receives input from all senses simultaneously. A smell can trigger a visual memory, a sound can evoke texture, a taste can recall an image. These cross-links bind the senses into narrative. Without such integration, perception would be fragmented and meaningless, a set of disconnected impressions. Unity gives context and continuity, the sense that the same eye is experiencing the same world from one moment to the next. Neuroscientists describe this phenomenon as multisensory binding. It depends on timing, attention, and expectation. When sensory data arrive together within a narrow temporal window, the brain interprets them as belonging to the same event. Attention strengthens this binding, while distraction can weaken it. Expectations, formed from memory and prediction, fill gaps, ensuring that perception flows smoothly even when data are incomplete. The result is a stable model of reality constructed anew every instant. Perception is not a recording, it is a performance continuously edited for coherence. This unity extends beyond the physical senses into abstract perception. Language, thought, and imagination use the same networks that merge sight and sound. When you read the word river, your brain may quietly simulate the motion of water or the sound of flow. The mind uses sensory templates to build concepts, blending imagination with recollection. The world within is therefore not separate from the world without. It is its echo, reconstructed from memory, association, and prediction. Philosophers have long debated how the mind creates unity from multiplicity. Some proposed a single central self that gathers sensations like a conductor leading instruments. Modern neuroscience suggests a different view. Integration arises from distributed cooperation, not command. There is no fixed center of perception, only networks exchanging information in constant feedback. Consciousness is the harmony itself, not a separate listener. The world exists for us because these signals synchronize into meaning. Even so, this unity can fracture. Neurological conditions such as synesthesia, sensory integration disorder, or temporal lobe epilepsy show what happens when timing or communication falter. The senses lose their alignment, and the world becomes too bright, too loud, or disjointed. Conversely, meditation and deep focus can enhance unity, producing a state where the boundaries between senses blur peacefully, the hum of existence felt as one continuous field. These experiences reveal both the fragility and the wonder of integration. Reflectively, the unity of perception is what allows life to feel whole. Without it, we would live in pieces, unable to connect sound to source or motion to meaning. The brain's synthesis gives us continuity not only of world but of self. The same circuits that bind vision and hearing also bind memory and identity. Each second, they reaffirm the story that all sensations belong to one consciousness inhabiting one body. Within this seamless orchestration lies the quiet miracle of awareness. Countless electrical impulses, light, vibration, chemistry, pressure, are transformed into a single continuous moment called now. The senses do not merely inform the mind. They are the mind's foundation. Through their unity, the scattered energies of the universe become experience, and the physical becomes personal. The world within the mind is not a copy of reality but its living translation, the only version any being can truly know. Every moment of awareness begins as a spark of sensation. Light falls on the eye, air vibrates against the ear, molecules brush the tongue and skin. These simple events, so ordinary that they pass unnoticed, are the foundation of all knowledge, emotion, and memory. The senses are not passive instruments but living gateways through which reality becomes personal. They turn physics into feeling, chemistry into color, vibration into meaning. To sense is to exist within a constant conversation between the self and the universe. Science reveals how finely tuned this conversation is. Each receptor, each nerve fiber, and each neural circuit represents millions of years of refinement. A single beam of light can activate hundreds of retinal cells. A whisper can bend the hair cells of the ear by less than a nanometer. Taste buds detect the faintest ions of salt, and the skin can feel a breeze lighter than a feather's weight. The senses are precise instruments, yet their precision serves not mathematics but experience. They exist so that life can know itself through encounter. The unity of perception gives the world its coherence, but it also gives us wonder. The combination of light, sound, scent, and touch forms a single, living field in which consciousness moves. Every color and sound is information, yet also poetry. Each carries emotion shaped by memory and culture. The sunrise is not only wavelengths scattered through air but a signal that life continues. A melody is not only ordered vibration but communication between nervous systems. The senses translate matter into meaning, binding the physical and the emotional into one seamless whole. Awareness, however, is fragile. It flickers in and out of focus, shifting between attention and absence. The senses gather endlessly, but the mind must choose what to notice. In that choosing lies consciousness itself, the ability to direct perception, to bring a small part of the world into clarity. The rest recedes into background, not lost but waiting. This selective perception makes reality livable, yet it also reminds us that what we call the world is only a fraction of what truly exists. Beyond the reach of our senses lies a universe of invisible light. inaudible sound, and untouchable forces. The known is always surrounded by the unknown. Still, it is within these limits that beauty thrives. The senses frame reality like a window, filtering chaos into order. The feel of cool water, the pattern of leaves in sunlight, the scent of rain, these are moments of balance between complexity and simplicity. They invite presence. Modern life often distracts from this immediacy, flooding perception with noise and repetition. Yet every person holds the ability to rediscover attention, to pause and let the senses reveal the quiet details that meaning is built upon. Awareness, when renewed, restores gratitude for perception itself. The senses also give empathy. Through them, we recognize pain in another's face, joy in another's voice, kindness in another's touch. They form the bridge between one consciousness and another. Without them, connection would be impossible. With them, compassion becomes instinct. The gift of perception, then, is not limited to understanding the world. It extends to understanding each other. To feel deeply is to know that we are not separate, but part of a shared field of experience. At the edge of wakefulness, when the body begins to rest, the senses soften, the eyes close, the muscles release, and the steady rhythm of breathing becomes the last sound the mind follows. The world outside grows dim, and another world, inner, gentle, unhurried, rises in its place. If you find yourself drifting toward that quiet, that is completely fine. The senses are not leaving you. They are only changing focus, turning from the outer landscape to the inner one. In this stillness, perception continues its ancient work. The ear listens to the heartbeat, the skin feels the weight of air, the lungs taste the night. Awareness narrows, then expands again, moving between light and darkness, between knowing and rest. It is here, in this transition, that the unity of the senses and the calm of the mind meet, the body's way of saying that life is both motion and peace. Every sound, every color, every breath has been part of a single conversation between you and the world. That dialogue never truly ends. It only changes rhythm. The senses will open again with morning light, ready to translate existence into meaning once more. Until then, let them rest in quiet harmony, carrying you through the darkness with their gentle memory of life's endless signals. We from Sleepy Stories wish you a good night.